Amici, e do, XBD, don't, don't, don't,
Parabnormal News. I'm Brad Bernards. Etched across the sky, long white lines reveal the high-altitude paths airplanes take to their destinations, but that's not all these vapor trails signify. Most of the concern about air travel's environmental impact focuses on aviation's gigantic carbon footprint, but new research serves as an alarming reminder of how harmful airplane contrails themselves are. Not to be confused with the conspiracy theory of chemtrails, contrails, aka condensation trails, are very real, and they're very impactful in terms of global warming processes. A study in 2011 calculated that the heat-trapping potential of contrail cirrus is actually greater than that of carbon emissions produced by airplanes. It's a disturbing outlook, given most of the world's efforts to combat aviation's environmental impacts are squarely addressed at limiting CO2 emissions. The study shows we can't afford to ignore a comprehensive view of how aviation as a whole is affecting the climate. According to a new study conducted by a team at the University of Colorado Boulder, the clouds that form Mars' thin atmosphere are caused by meteors. Meteor smoke, which is icy dust that is left behind when a meteor burns up in Mars' atmosphere, is what partially creates the cirrus-looking clouds that are positioned around 18 miles above the planet's surface. Some clouds here on Earth are formed by particles, such as grains of dust or sea salt, that are carried into the air by the wind, and then the water molecules condense around them, which causes the clouds to form and grow. Mars, on the other hand, has barely any particles floating around since the atmosphere is so thin, but when small meteors enter Mars' atmosphere, they often burn up, which creates fine dust or meteor smoke, which are the particles needed for clouds to develop. While the Martian clouds are much too weak and the atmosphere is too thin to produce rain, snow did fall close to the North Pole in 2008 and was witnessed by the Phoenix Mars lander. Find all of tonight's stories at paranormalradio.com. I'm Brad Bernards, Parabnormal News.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS speed rescue.
Contact, nice to be in orbit. The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Broadcasting from a shack on a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. I'm Joe Roop, and this is Lighting the Void. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome back. It is good to be back on this Monday night, July the 8th, on into the night. Tonight we're going to be discussing UFOs, the UFO encounter, ET contact, and what happens to humans after they have these type of experiences. And we'll bring up the idea of superhumans or hybrids. And we're going to be with the one and only Mary Rodwell is going to be with us. So that's coming up. Also, the show was brought to you by GetTheTea.com. Make sure you come to the webinar Monday night on the 15th. That's next Monday on the 15th at 5 p.m. Pacific. Make sure that you make it out to that. And that way, you get a chance to get an exclusive coupon and all of the good stuff that we give away there. And also, the show is brought to you by AncientLifeOil.com, the best CBD oil on the planet, and Prepare with thefringe.com. Don't forget, all that shipping is one day. If you buy anything over $100 at preparewiththefringe.com, then you get free shipping. I want to thank all of you for supporting the show, and I will give those shout outs for the month of June. You can support the show by donating or going to the Amazon portal, or going to any one of our sponsors as well, or just share and like the show. And I had a really cool person jumped on Facebook and told me that they were listening in Texas, and I forgot the name. I don't even have Facebook pulled up, but that they had they started listening on Thursday nights, I believe, is when they started listening to the show. And then they ended up, now there's 15 or 16 of them that get together and listen on Thursday nights. And I believe that's in, Texas. That's right. I'll have to pull that up and give you a shout out later. Thank you guys so much for doing that. Also, if you've had a UFO sighting you'd like to report, head over to ufoseekers.com, backed and supported by the Fringe FM and Lighting the Void. And if you want to keep a journalistic approach to what's going on, give them a follow. UFO Seekers on Twitter. Also, their YouTube channel is youtube.com/UFO Seekers. The website's ufoseekers.com. So Mary Rodwell is with us, and Mary is the founder and principal of the Australian Close Encounter Research Network, better known as ACERN. She was born in the United Kingdom and eventually migrated to Western Australia in 1991. She currently resides in Queensland, and Mary is a former nurse, midwife, and health educator, and was employed as a professional counselor for the National Health Service UK and Australian counselling agencies, a Silver Chain and Centrecare. But since 1994, Mary has worked in private practice as a professional counselor, hypnotherapist, metaphysical teacher, researcher, author, Reiki Master, and an international speaker. Now, ACERN's primary role is to offer professional counseling, support, hypnotherapy, and information to individuals and their families with anomalous paranormal experiences, particularly specializing in the abduction-contact experience. Mary is also recognized internationally as one of Australia's leading researchers and writers in the UFO field and contact phenomena. She's the author of the highly acclaimed book, Awakening, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life. You can visit the website at alienlady.com, also ACERN at acern.com.au. Mary, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Australia. That's pretty cool.
Hello, Joe. Thank you very much. Yes, it's winter time here in Queensland at the moment, but it's really quite warm because I'm in a subtropical part of Australia, so it's never too cold here, which is lovely.
What time is it, by the way? I'm just curious. This stuff gets to me. I don't know why, but it does.
Well, it's 2:00 in the afternoon, so
Great.
This is not siesta time for most people.
Great. Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm glad that you're here because I've heard a lot of cool things about you. I've heard things like Mary Rodwell's the real deal. You need to check out Mary Rodwell. You need to speak with Mary. And I've said, okay. And I think me and Patrick had a discussion about you, and he got a hold of you. And now you're here, so I've got a ton of questions about this because this field is where a lot of people consider it kind of leans into the woo-woo side a little bit, right? But it also, with all of the stuff going on here lately, it's not so woo-woo to me because, I mean, with all of the UFO kind of disclosure stuff happening now that they're kind of admitting that there's stuff out there, and the military has been admitting there's stuff out there, I think it validates a lot of experiences for people. And ever since I talked to Whitley Strieber about it, and he kind of told me, I don't know what's going on, and couldn't really explain to me if it was out of body or if they were physically here. The mystery got deeper for me. And so this is kind of what you specialize in, right? Someone that's had an experience, and then you try to get that experience out of them and then counsel them from there. Is that right?
Absolutely, Joe. The reason I got into this in the first place was a gentleman walked through my door 25 years ago and said, Mary, I've heard you're open-minded. For this, there's no support groups. For this, they just think you're a loony. And proceeded to say he'd wake up in the morning with shaved areas on his leg, marks on his body. His family, his partner was having experiences, so were the kids. And he said, and, the relatives won't even come to the house because they think it's demons. So that was my introduction to all of this. Unfortunately, at the time, because I'm one of these people that if it's weird and wonderful, I've got a book on it. I happen to have 2 books that I bought synchronously only a few weeks prior to that. And one of them was Abduction by Dr. John Mack, who some of your listeners will know was a former professor of psychiatry at Harvard University, who wrote the book Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens. That, for me, was a professional writing about this experience, doing the psychological testing and saying these people are sane, but they are definitely having some kind of anomalous experience and believing it's real. And of course, Whitley, you've just mentioned. I read the book Communion. So although I didn't know a lot about it at the time, I certainly was prepared to listen to this gentleman who was articulate, middle-aged man, very articulate, very grounded, who was saying, I know this sounds weird, but this is my experience. And that really, started me down the rabbit hole. Within a couple of weeks, someone else knocked on my door with a similar kind of thing. So 3,500 people later, families, children, all a range of cultures right across the globe, from doctors, nurses, social workers to psychiatrists to, the politicians and celebrities have all, there are so many now that are owning to their experience, whether they're a scientist or whether a housewife or a farmer. And to me, when the patterns are so similar time and time again, there is a point where you say, hold on a minute. This all can't be people's fantasies or hallucinations, or they're all Star Trek fanatics, because the bottom line is that there are many people that have these experiences that don't believe or have not believed there was such a thing as UFOs and ETs anyway, until they've had the experience. So this isn't about a belief. And that really annoys me when people say, oh, it's because you believe. No, it isn't. It's because people have often the experience, and then they can't help but believe there's something going on. So for me, this business, is this real or not, is a load of nonsense, because now we know that every 6 minutes around the globe, someone's seeing a UFO with iPhones and all the rest of it now, not knowing what these anomalous lights are or whatever. Now the government's finally admitting a little bit about we don't know what these are, which of course we both know, with the truth embargo, they're only, that's playing a silly game, because we all know it's real. The bottom line is now, though, that the many millions, I believe millions, perhaps even more than that, are having encounters. They are genuine people with genuine experiences. But as Whitley says, some of this experience is physical, some of it is non-physical, out of body. So we've got 25% of the tangible marks on the body, being aware of being taken, maybe having procedures done, but sometimes the experience is out of body. 75% we've discovered through our research is out of body, which is much harder to quantify if they see it in a dreamlike state.
Fantastic. And you got into this mainly because when I'm looking at your background here, you're a registered nurse. Am I correct about that?
And a midwife.
Right.
Yeah, so my background certainly is medical science, and that has helped enormously, because what it's meant is that I've been able to examine this from a number of perspectives, not just because I'm a therapist. I mean, I'm a professional counselor and hypnotherapist, but what I've needed to know was, what is the tangibility here? What is the reality? from a physical sense. And when you've got people waking up with marks on the body, for example, some of them actually fluoresce in black ultraviolet light, some with implants, for example, and Dr. Roger Leir was the pioneer of removing such implants and the anomalies with his book, The Aliens and the Scalpel, who actually did the foreword for my book, Awakening, by the way. I've been very careful to see it from a number of levels, and that includes the DNA, which has been a particular one that's been interesting to me because I've met a number of molecular biologists and whistleblower geneticists that have admitted that now they look at our DNA, they see where we've been, if you like, spliced and put back together again. So we've got DNA that is unusual, and it's unusual because I believe, you know, all those gods that we had visiting us over the centuries and through a mythology that people have seen as gods were, in fact, in my estimation, all they really were advanced technologies from extraterrestrials that have been visiting this planet. And you know, the indigenous tribes all know this anyway. They call them the star people that have come down. They're being told that they've been genetically engineered. So, you know, it's time for people to really stop saying, is this real? And start saying, yes, it is real. And what does it mean?
Yeah, a lot of it is perception, I think. And I wonder sometimes, because if you take somebody like me, and I think you and I are the same on this, where I haven't really had a personal encounter. I might have seen one or two UFOs in my life, but I haven't really had any of my own personal experiences. And before I assume anything, you haven't had any real experiences yourself, though, have you? Just curious.
That's absolutely true. I'm not what you'd call your traditional experiencer in the sense that I've been aware of being taken on board a craft or anything like that. But what I have explored is the non-physical realm, and that is exploring all the paranormal side of things. And that for me has given me a real understanding, if you like, when you do things, when you do energy work, for example, you tune into energies. And I'm, for example, I'm aware sometimes of things maybe being around me. I might not see orbs of light, but I can be aware that they're there because I may sense them. We've all got these abilities. This isn't special to me. That's not special, to anyone. We've all got these abilities. We just dismiss them a lot of the time. But, in terms of a traditional experiencer that is being aware of being taken out through walls, maybe being aware of being on a spacecraft, waking up the next morning with marks on the body, I've not had any of that. But, I said once I was interviewed for a breakfast television many years ago now. And I remember the presenter saying to me, "So Mary, do you actually believe them then?" And I remember saying to her this, I said, "Look, I've never been to Alaska, but if enough people have gone to Alaska and shown me pictures and talked about their experiences there, I may never go to Alaska, but I've got to believe Alaska exists." And that's really the bottom line.
Yeah, I understand exactly where you're coming from. Sometimes it's enough to say for sure something is going on. I mean, you could say that for sure. Something is going on. At the very least, these people are having some type of paranormal or abnormal experience with aliens, entities, whatever you want to call them. But I think what I wonder about the most is because someone like me who's always looking into this, talking to many people, I get emails all the time about experiences and UFOs. You've done a lot of one-on-one time with people. So what are some of the first things that you can tell right away that someone's actually had a real experience?
It's a very good question. And I'm asked this a lot by the media as well. How do you know they're telling the truth? And how do you know that it's a reality? Well, I say one of my answers to that is a lot of people come to see me, and I live in a very small little tourist town in the middle of Queensland, so I'm not easy to get to. People have come from other countries to see me, and apart from all over Australia. And I'm saying, do you think they spend all that money to come and tell me a porky pie? Because I'm not going to actually make them famous. I'm not going to give them lots of money or anything. They're coming because they want answers and they're prepared to pay money to even get to see me. The second thing is when somebody comes to me, they may not even still be certain it's real, but they'll come to me, they'll tell me about their experiences, and I've got a questionnaire I send out. And you'll be amazed at how many of the patterns that they discover of this experience that they hadn't been aware of prior to coming to see me. And they'll say, well, I still don't know whether I'm imagining this or whatever. So they're not coming in saying, I know it's real necessarily. They're coming saying, I really don't know, but I want to know whether I'm really crazy or whether or not this is a real thing. So for the most part, most people coming to see me are genuine. They really want to understand. They want to make sense of it. And to be honest, a lot of them would rather it wasn't true, because if it's true, it means they're going to have to completely reappraise their reality, right from their beliefs about themselves, their religion, for example, scientific understanding, anthropology, archaeology, you name all the spheres that we all have to look at and look at them in a new way once we realize that this is a reality. So this isn't something people mostly want to acknowledge. If anything, they would rather not acknowledge it. So you've got all of that. And the bottom line as a therapist is, when you've been counseling people for 35 years, you know when someone's coming from an authentic place, and or whether or not there's something that is a problem for them in terms of their mental health, for example, because that's a favorite. Well, they're hallucinating, they're psychotic, they're X, Y, and Z. You can very quickly find out when you're talking to someone where they're coming from that authentic place, and that this is a reality for them rather than something that they have, got mixed up with some kind of psychosis or whatever. And for the most part, people are not psychotic. For the most part, people are actually just trying to make sense of the fact that they are more multidimensionally in tune, if you like, which means that they may very well see orbs of light. They may actually see energy fields. They may see beings, and they will be questioning all of that, but also having downloads of information, for example. And a lot of them are trying to make sense of that. That doesn't make them crazy. It just means that they're more aware of a multidimensional reality.
So do they get a lot of stuff at first, like in bits and pieces, right? Like they might remember like they saw something. It's not like a story where they know the every little detail about what happened, or is it like that? Or do they just have bits and pieces of what they remember?
It really depends on how much they are open to it. For a lot of people, it may appear as a dream. They think they've had a dream where they've remembered in the dream of being on board a UFO, seeing beings, and they'll still think it's a dream until I say to them, they'll say, it was a dream that I had 10 years ago. If you've still got memory of a dream 10 years ago, then it's more likely to be real than not real. Because most dreams you lose within a few minutes of waking up. If it's still with you, it's more likely to be something that isn't a dream. The other thing may happen where they have missing time, and a lot come to me for hypnosis because they've gone on a journey. For example, it's taken 3 times longer than it should have done. They may feel a bit weird afterwards, and they'll not know what's happened. And obviously in hypnosis, you can actually recover those memories and find out what happened in that missing time. But the more open they are, the more they'll get more and more information. It depends on how much they shut it down.
So you just said, okay. So you said that if someone remembers their dream, I've got dreams I remember since I was 5 years old. And I'm just saying they were very traumatic, like 1 or 2 that I remember. And I don't know if what happened, or if I know it was some type of paranormal experience, but what you're saying is because I had that experience and I still remember it, and I'm 37 now, then more than likely something real did happen to me at that point in time.
Absolutely, Joe. If you've got a dream that is particularly significant that you haven't forgotten, then it will probably mean it's an out-of-body experience, and it's more likely to have been a reality. And, the thing is, with this experience, 75% of it is in a non-physical state. And this is through the research that we've done with the free organization of which I'm a co-founder. And this is a scientific organization, mostly retired physicists, psychologists, clinical psychologists, neuroscientists. We've got a whole range of PhDs that are part of this. And the survey that we did was 600 questions with 4,200 people across the globe. And this is, in fact, what we're actually discovering is that a lot of the experiences are actually in a non-physical state. And that's why it's so difficult to quantify, because it isn't necessarily going to always be physical. And yet this is what we've discovered. That and that's why I think the nuts and bolts ufologists struggle as well, because all of this experienced when you're in your astral state or your non-physical state, they've avoided like the plague, because they want to keep it as grounded as possible. You know, how big was the craft? What time did you see it? How many people were with you? Have you got a photograph, etc., which is important. But that is such a small part of what else is going on with people that have this experience. And this is what we discovered through the free organization and our research, which is actually in a book called Beyond UFOs now, and it's the science of consciousness with non-human intelligences. And what we're saying is this is all about consciousness. This is a lot more complex than most people have understood.
Beautiful. I've always thought that, like, especially like you brought up Whitley earlier when he wrote the book about his wife and after she passed away. And, he came back and started talking about, like, I don't know. He went to the Monroe Institute and he said, I don't know if this has got something to do with the aliens and the astral realm, but I know there's something tied together, what we call the astral realm. Right. But, yeah, that is fascinating. So most of the time this stuff happens to people, or a lot of the time it happens to people at a certain, like at night when they're asleep or they're in their room. I mean, you never hear about people that are just walking out in the field and get taken in a craft. Not usually, but you're saying most of the time it's when people are asleep or in bed or when they're having an out-of-body experience.
Not necessarily. Yes, a lot will happen at night, but people have been literally having a wander in a field, or they may be drawn to a remote place and not know why. That's often because of the pickup. They may not have realized why they felt drawn to a particular place, but that may be, as I say, a pickup or whatever. But people have been picked up or taken in all sorts of public places, and they've just felt a bit strange, because the other part of this is that they can stretch time, and they can take you and you can be with them an hour or two, and it'll only be a few minutes in our time, because we're not talking just about physical beings here. We're talking about interdimensional beings, extra-dimensional beings, trans-dimensional beings, and also beings from our future, and probably a few more I've not listed, because
Okay.
we're not, again, just talking about the physical.
Wow. Okay. So I had a guest on my show that was trying to explain this to me once, and he told me that the best way to explain it is like he was a fish that was pulled out of water for a moment, pulled out of his reality for a moment, messed with for a little bit, and put back in. Does that make sense? Does that sound right to you?
Absolutely. It's a very good analogy.
Okay. All right. So then if this is what's going on, then there has to be some type of, and this is where your research has led to, there has to be some type of experimentation or something going on, like something that's watching us or experimenting on us or pushing us along, or something that we just can't see that from time to time interacts with us. It's very hard to explain, but that's what I'm getting from all this.
What I'm saying is it's not one particular type of intelligence either. And, what we're discovering is different types of beings have different agendas. Some actually work together. For example, the mantis being, which is like the praying mantis being, my research is saying that it's actually a master geneticist that works with timelines. So, and then you'll get the little helper ones, which may be the zetas, the greys that pick people up. Part of their role is to take them for whatever, there might be a genetic, some kind of genetic material taken, there may be, and healing procedures done. And that's another thing people don't realize is 50% of those that have had ET contact have reported healings when they've been taken on board craft. And this is everything from cancer right through to other kinds of illnesses and what have you as well. This is a whole new ball game that is not out there in the mainstream, because for the most part, it's never really been looked at seriously in the way that we've been looking at it with our research with Free. And the whole point of that is to say, what actually is going on? What are the things people remember? What is the shift or the change after contact? And that is extraordinary. And this is where, I talk about awakening, how it can transform your life. I knew when I first started this by writing that book that people change from their experiences. And people don't change out of a hallucination. They'll only change if something is really real that's happened to them. And it's the changes that I found quite enormously compelling. And these changes are what's going on now. And this is what we've recorded with Free and with my own research. And that's why I wrote the book, the second book, The New Human.
And how many people do you think, if you had to guess, how many people do you think you've worked with personally? Just you?
About 3,500.
Wow.
And that's families. And also children. I mean, some of the children, 6 and 7 years old, that remember going on spacecraft. They talk about the beings as being family. They're connected to them. One little 8-year-old told me that his ancestors were the mantid beings, and when he dies, he's going back to being a mantid. That's his ancestor. And having no problem whatsoever in describing to me what happens on board craft, what he learns on board craft with other humans like himself and other children that he says were different. And I said to him, how are they different? And he said, well, some of them are, that they're different because of their eyes. They may be bigger. And he knew that they weren't quite human. And we're talking, of course, about what most people would term hybrids.
Wow. Yeah. So I totally understand why you don't say I believe. I pretty much know this is happening. Fascinating stuff. Wow. All right, we'll be back with Mary Rodwell, guys. Don't go anywhere.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
This is Corbin, son of the one and only Joe Root, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
So, have you heard of heavy metals? I'm not talking about the heavy metals in the junkyard. I'm talking about the heavy metals that build up in your body. Heavy metals in your body can make you feel sluggish, fatigued, and just plain off. Why not try Life Change Tea at getthetea.com? Cleansing your body and making you feel great. No, not cleansing the outside of your body, but cleansing the inside of your body of intruders that sneak their way into you and set up an intruder camp. Life Change Tea helps remove unwanted intruder camps. Brew it, steep it, and drink in the results. Tastes great, so you can create a new health habit. Our tea loves to help people. It just needs the chance. So order yours today by logging on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Our Life Change Super Strength Tea is waiting. This could be a beautiful relationship. Take charge of your health. Order at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com.
Alex X. Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, The Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm. Call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Listen, I want to tell you about G.I. Joy from GetTheTea.com. It's the best alchemical concoction of goodies for your stomach and digestive system I can recommend, and that's all based on my experience. Packed with colostrum, acidophilus, aloe, peppermint, and turmeric. If you do your own research, then you know this is the bee's knees for the stomach and digestion. Now, due to Big Brother's ears and the eye in the sky, you know I can't go into the details about what it helped me with. All I can say is I got relief. It's non-GMO, no fillers, no preservatives, manufactured right here in the US of A, and delivered to you by the only people who stay on top of the game and are out in front. Go grab a bottle of G.I. Joy at GetTheTea.com and see what all the fuss is about. Again, that's GetTheTea.com.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, me old china plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Light in the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your north and south and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you beat a Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to The Fringe FM, and visit the website thefringe.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on The Fringe FM.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. Tonight we're speaking with Mary Rodwell. If you want to call into the show, it's 1-800-588-0335. Tomorrow night on the program, we're going to be speaking with Grimerica. Graham Dunlop and Darren Grimes is going to be with us. It's been a long time since we spoke to them. And then Michael P. Masters will be with us later on in the week. But tonight, it's Mary Rodwell, and we're speaking about the contact experience and what happens afterwards. Do people get, after they've had these experiences, do they come back with certain, other than things like implants and things like that, which I totally believe in. I've seen enough and heard enough about it. I 100% believe in implants, but do they come back with, because I've heard stories about people that come back with extraordinary gifts, or maybe that it was just opened up to them or something. Does that happen as well?
Absolutely. And the reason that I know that people have had a real experience is because of that, because they change. And you don't change after a hallucination, but you certainly change after a real experience. And for them, they start to open up more intuitively or psychically, if you like. They start to be aware of energies. They start to be aware of seeing, orbs of light, for example, or beings. Or they'll get precognitive, in other words, see future events before they occur. All these kinds of things are these experiences that, or this awareness expands after these experiences. And on top of that is another fascinating side of this is where they'll get downloads of scientific information or information about the true origin of the species or information about healing or new technologies or this kind of thing. I mean, I've spoken to children and teenagers that have had downloads on quantum physics, for example. Not only that, they'll start to articulate sometimes strange languages, which we call star languages or light language, for example. This is spontaneous afterwards. They may start writing strange scripts or some strange symbols as part of their experience. Some of them may start to create unusual artwork, which is of planets or different beings, or it may be complex geometric artwork, which they say when you view it actually activates a kind of shift in consciousness. All of this after their experiences. If you want to say to me, where is the evidence that this is real? This is the evidence it's real, because people do not change creatively, for example, or in the way that they do multidimensionally, unless something encouraged that or triggered that, for example. So it's actually been a catalyst for a whole new shift in their awareness or their multidimensional awareness. And it changes the way that they want to live. They often will decide to live a more holistic lifestyle. They may change their diet, for example. They may lose interest totally in the whole materialistic kind of lifestyle and want to live more simply. There's a whole range of shifts in their whole lifestyle that all happen after contact. So that's your evidence in terms of, if you want to say, well, what's the reality? The reality is people change in incredibly enormous ways, both spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, and physically sometimes as well. There'll be changes in their physical makeup. All of this after contact. So don't, ever say to me, do you think this is real? I have seen enough to be absolutely convinced that this is part of the reason that they're interacting with us, is because they're creating a whole new shift in humanity. And that's why I wrote the book, The New Human.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of when Michael Newton wrote a book about Journey of Souls, and he himself didn't remember his in-between lives or anything like that. But he had enough patience, and he had talked to enough people and worked with enough people that he started pulling out so many parallels that he was absolutely convinced that it was real, 100% knew it was real, and then made a book about it called Journey of Souls. That's what you remind me of. You remind me of that, but more on a ET contact level. I wonder, I've always wondered about this too. What about before we were born? Do people ever tell you that I can remember who I was or where I came from or what planet or star system I came from before I got here?
Absolutely, Joe. And because I do hypnosis, often it can be in an adult through hypnosis, they'll suddenly have a recall of coming from another star system or another dimension. But what's even more compelling is if you've got, and I remember this 9-year-old wanting to speak to me when I was talking to his father in the US, and he said to his dad, "Can I speak to Mary over Skype?" And I said to him, "So why do you want to speak to me?" And he said, "Well, it's because of your frequency. I want to tell you that I'm from Orion, that I was a light physicist, and I worked on time travel technology, and I've come to this planet now." He said, "But the scientists here are pretty dim because they don't actually understand the true nature of physics." The closest, he said, was Nikola Tesla. Now, he had absolute conscious memory of where he came from. Only a few weeks ago, I spoke to another young boy, all of 10 years old, in Australia, that told me he remembers coming from another planet that exploded. He drew what he looked like, which was a blue being, and explained he's come to this planet for the first time. It's his first time on planet Earth. He said, "I've come here to help with the pollution on this planet. That's part of my mission," is how he explained it. There's another one that said he was from a 5-year-old that said he was from Andromeda. His mother was a blue being. He said that the language was telepathy, and they absorbed food through their skin, and explained that, he came here with a mission in terms of helping this planet evolve. Now, that's just a few of the many that I cite in my book of children, sometimes as early as 5 and 6 years old, explaining sometimes really complex understanding of how they knew they came here. One 7-year-old actually literally explaining that he was in that in-between life that Michael Newton talks about, because I'm familiar with both his books.
Oh, good.
And he said he was a will-o'-the-wisp, a spirit. He remembers looking at the right lifetime that he needed to incarnate here, and then he found himself in his mother's tummy. So this is without any hypnosis. This is them articulating the in-between lives, where the previous origin before that, and how they chose to come and incarnate on this planet. Now, because I do hypnosis, I've taken many, many people into past lives in exactly the same way, where they've described either a lifetime on this planet or in another planet and what it was like, but also that in-between space as a spirit before they made the decision to incarnate onto this planet at this time. So everything that Michael Newton has done is certainly confirmed in my research. Only, of course, my specialization has been our interaction with non-human intelligences. And I have to tell you that many of us were those beings before we came here. So some of the people that talk to me about their understanding of their origins will say, I'm from Andromeda, or I'm from the Pleiades, or whatever, and I've chosen as a soul to come into human form at this time. And this is really why many of them call themselves hybrids, because that's what they feel like. They feel they're part Pleiadian or part Andromedan and part human. And so they feel that dual consciousness. And more are relating to that now. So, you know, I'm getting this time and time again, where either a child or a teenager will say, I'm a hybrid. And this is how I know I'm a hybrid. And this is my origins. And this is what I talk about in my presentations now, is the fact that these are not only children, teenagers, and older generations that are relating to a particular star system.
What is the youngest child that's ever came to you and told you that they knew where they were from? Was it toddler age, or a little older, or was it teenager?
No, usually it can be as young as about 4 or 5. I remember one 5-year-old, and the mother told me about the fact that she'd only just discovered that she'd had contact herself. And it was fortunate because the daughter was drawing a being, and she said, how do you know about that? And she said, well, that's my family. And her mother said, well, what do you mean that's your family? I'm your mother. She said, no, my other mother. She said, and I'm not from here. And the mother said to her, well, you know, can you draw what you looked like? And the little 5-year-old said, no, because you'd be frightened.
Oh, wow. And so, you know, it goes without saying that kids that age, usually they don't make up stuff like that. You know, they don't just come out and tell you they saw things or from somewhere, or have had that kind of experience and just make it up. Most of the time, they're telling you the truth. And that's something we've brought up quite a bit, Mary, on the show, is why do certain things happen to children? You know, you hear a lot of frightening experiences that happen to children, and their parents tell them, well, that's not there. Don't look at that, or get it out of your mind. And they're trained not to look at things or perceive certain things anymore. And we get it out of our mind. And I wonder if that's related to what you've done, or if you understand what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. One of the problems is because of the programming of older generations, and because of the fact that we live in this disconnect to our multidimensional awareness, is because we've been told, oh, that's an imaginary friend, or that's not real, or whatever. We end up with them being confused and in conflict with what's real and what's not real. And so with the children, parents often say to me, my child's explained about, you know, where they're from. They've explained that they go on spacecraft. They're learning things on spacecraft. They've been taken to other planets. They're being shown how to levitate. They're being shown how to use their psychic abilities. As one 7-year-old explained to me the same thing, that she'd had this experience a few nights prior to that. The parents say to me, I've never front-loaded them. I've never talked about any of this. Because that's the criticism that people will say is, oh, you've talked about it. They'll believe it because you've been talking about it. And they say, we've not done any of that. And yet this is what my child is saying. what do I do about it? And the answer is you listen and you let them know they're being heard. It may not be safe for them to talk about it at school like that, because obviously they can get teased at school or whatever, or they end up seeing a psychologist. But the bottom line is with these children now, parents will say, you know, how can I support them and what have you, because it's plainly a reality for them. And I say, well, you listen and you ask them about it and ask them what they need from you, whether or not it's just to listen and to say it's okay, because that way it enables them then to keep going with what's going on for them. And as long as it's positive and helpful, then there's no more other than you need to do, but you have to listen, because otherwise they're going to be in conflict and be afraid because, oh, I can't experience this because it's, you know, my parents are angry with me, or they won't let me talk about it or whatever. And you create this huge disconnect. And to give you an example of that, I was talking to a teenager, Zach, who's in my book, and he told me when he was 10 years old, he was having lots of experiences, and he talked about it with his family, and his siblings said to him, you've got to stop talking about all this weird stuff. We're fed up of hearing about it. Just get with the real world and shut that all down and start getting normal. And so he said, Mary, I tried. He said, I tried to shut it all down and just be like them. And he said, and I did it for a short while, and I became so depressed that I wanted to kill myself. And he said, so I made a decision. Either I go back to how I was before, because at least then I could cope with planet Earth. He said, but if I stay the way I am now, I'm just going to give up. And so he made a conscious choice to go back to being sensitive and aware of his other reality. And he then was able to survive. Now, that's an extreme case, maybe. But the bottom line is, as soon as we shut kids down, and as you say, you know when a kid is coming from a truth and whether they're just making something up or they've seen a cartoon that's X, Y, and Z. There is a big difference if you're a caring parent to know when your child is speaking a truth and when a child is just telling a fantasy or whatever. There's a very, very obvious difference.
Yeah, I wonder if we never told our kids that, like ever, if our entire society in this world would just let that stuff go and actually work on it, where we would be, what we would be able to see, what we would be able to perceive. I wonder about that sometimes. But now that you bring all this up, I do have to wonder, and it's kind of a big question, but what's the overall, if this stuff is really going on, Mary, then what's the overall plan? I mean, what's going on out there with all these different species doing many different things? Then who are we? Are we just beings from other different dimensions having an experience, or do we really die? You know, big questions like that. Do they ever talk about these types of things, the children or some of your patients?
Oh, certainly they do, because they're trying to make sense of it. I mean, the big question is when they come to me, why me? What's it all about? What does it mean? Where does it take us? You know, the big questions about who are we? You know, what are our origins and whatever? And that's where I've wanted to focus, because I've wanted to look at the big picture. There's plenty of others looking at certain aspects of this. And let's face it, it's multi-complex anyway. And we've got, from what I can gather, many, many different intelligences visiting this planet. But from the research that I'm doing, and it's looking at the DNA, it seems that there was a major change in us as a species, where we went from Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, and then the missing link to Homo sapiens sapiens, where we gained 25% greater brain size, and also 223 genes were added to our DNA, which were all to do with higher psychological functioning. So here we are suddenly becoming a new species. And with that, I was told by a geneticist that worked with Dr. Francis Crick, who was co-founder of the DNA molecule. What he said was, Mary, I worked with Dr. Crick, and I can tell you now there is no other species on this planet that has those 223 genes, which were a sideways insertion of genetic material into us as a species. It was not something that evolved, it was added to. And since that time, those that have had experiences that have been open to their downloads, many have said at least 12 different species of non-human intelligences have added their DNA to human DNA. And that is one of the main reasons they're interested in us, because we're part of them. They are the ancestors, because they're the ones that have cooperated to actually create Homo sapiens sapiens. And there's so much evidence now to show that this is, we call it dormant DNA, where somebody's saying, that we only use 5% of our DNA, the rest is dormant. Well, that dormant DNA, as Crick was saying, is they, and he puts that in inverted commas, created us. And when we reached a certain level of intelligence, we would actually understand what we need to know about who we are. Well, that's where we're at now. We're realizing we're a created species, and that we are connected to something else. And this something else is the DNA that's not of this earth, but has been brought here by these intelligences that we called in previous times gods. And they were genetically engineering us into being Homo sapiens sapiens. And they've been monitoring us all the way through, and are still monitoring us and doing various upgrades. And this is why, I wrote the book, The New Human, because, each generation, what I was seeing was an upgrade. And what I mean by that is more multidimensionally aware, more activated, if you like, than the previous generation. And we've got to a point now where we're seeing this difference, but it's being misdiagnosed as ADHD or Asperger's or certain forms of autism or dyslexia. But in fact, what I'm saying is, I don't believe that's a dysfunction. I believe that's an upgrade. And I've got a great deal of evidence to support this as being why these children are different. And it's not to do with lots of other things, that there's something wrong with their genes. It's actually because they're more activated.
Really? Because I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was a kid. And, my parents my father didn't want to put me on anything because he was ashamed of it, like something's wrong with your kid, they don't ever want to acknowledge that. But, you said something very big a minute ago. You said that we're starting to realize that we're created and that we come from somewhere else. And I wonder if that's why we're one of the only species on this planet. I mean, it's obvious we're far more intelligent than most animals, at least we think we are. But I wonder if that's why we created religion, right? Because we know we're from somewhere else. Because religion's played such a huge role in our society. And if you look back at ancient Egypt and stuff like that, it seems like it all spawned from that. Like the Zachariah Stitchens thing. Does any of the children or any of the people that you talk to report anything about our origins as far as our history goes here?
Many have been given a revised history lesson on terms of the origin of the species and where we're from. And certainly, if you remember, the pharaohs themselves called themselves the sons of God. Mm-hmm. And they often interbred because they didn't want to mix their genes with the average human. And one of the slides that I show in my presentation is Akhenaten. And there's a couple of interesting DNA differences with Akhenaten and his funny-shaped oval type of skull that is quite different to the human one. And if you look, these skulls have been found all over the world, and they've got twice the brain size. And I believe they were one of the gods, or thought they were gods, and it's all really just higher technology that wasn't understood, and that was why they were called gods. It wasn't because they were gods, and I say gods with a little g. The problem is that because of that, primitive people see this magic as they see it and think that these are gods and made religion from them. But the religion was created through a misconception that these were gods and we had to do as we are told. And that is the problem, is that we've got to, although some of these beings did want to bring in a more loving kind of belief system, like Jesus was one of those. I believe he was a star being. He was brought in to bring in a new kind of understanding of unconditional love, loving one another, not damaging one another. But unfortunately, the religion created a belief system around it that in fact in many ways changed the message, which was, pretty simple really. Love one another. Don't do anything to somebody else you shouldn't do to you. You won't like being done to you. Right. But there's a dogma that's been has been perpetuated around that. So all of a sudden there's all these human-made rules that they're saying God said. Well, actually, I don't think Jesus did say a lot of the stuff that they're saying. And when you go back into religion, you look at the theology, you look at how certain things were put together to make it as though God said it, when you realize a lot of it's been manipulated. And, I think the Bible's been retranslated something like 300 times. When you think about the retranslations and the agendas, and unfortunately, that's what I think has changed a lot of the spiritual messages of some of these avatars, or we call them messengers, or, God's messenger or whatever, were really just high spiritual beings that were bringing a special message for us to start treating each other with respect and not killing each other because we didn't like the look of them, or because we wanted their oil or gas, bluntly. Right. So it's become manipulated, and that is the problem with modern day religions, I believe now.
So just to be clear, and I totally agree with you on that at 100%. But just to be clear, are there some of us now that are living? Are some of us just regular humans? I mean, are we all from somewhere? And based on your study,
I believe, and I say this often, we're all hybrids, but some of us are more awake than others. And that means that some of us have been, if you like, assisted to become more activated. And part of that has been happening through these intelligences, the ones that have gone up onto spacecraft, being taught on spacecraft, had healings, given an understanding of who they are. They've been more activated than some of the humans that are not aware. And so they're staying more in the 3D rather than realizing actually we all have the potential to be activated humans. But again, this denies the, if you like, we talked about the soul. If the soul, for example, wishes to wake up in this lifetime, then it's going to make sure it puts itself in a place where it's going to be activated. And to get activated doesn't necessarily mean you're seeing a UFO, which is one way it can happen. It can happen through a near-death experience. It can happen through an out-of-body experience, or it can happen through a shamanic experience, for example, or through learning healing or various energy work. That may be another way you get activated. What all those do is raise your awareness, your frequency, if you like, to access more of the information held in your DNA, which is telling you more about yourself. So then that's somebody will say, I think I'm from the Pleiades, because they've activated that part of their DNA that has the Pleiadian content, if you like. But not everyone will choose to wake up this lifetime, because we're talking about the soul orchestrating the journey. And for some, they're going to want to wake up during this human journey. And others are saying, well, I don't want to in this lifetime. I want to stay with 3D. I want to stay and do the 3D stuff. So we're almost getting a splitting, if you like, of humanity in the way that my research is showing. And one lovely lady I write about, Dr. Lena Olson, who's a molecular biologist, but also an experiencer, said, we're separating out into two frequencies, Mary, low frequency people and high frequency people. The low frequency ones have chosen to stay in 3D for this lifetime. The other ones saying, no, I want to wake up. I want to find out more about what and who I am. And I want to go to another level of awareness. So we've got this separating going on at the moment. And you can see it on the planet. Yeah. Those that want to kill each other and don't care a stuff about anybody else, just I'm going to kill you no matter what, because I don't like the color of your skin or your religion or whatever. And you've got the others that are trying to change the planet, trying to heal the planet, that are trying to look after the animals, that are trying to do healing on lots of different levels. There's your separation. And that's what we're seeing going on at the moment from a spiritual level, is this separation of awareness from those which are wanting to stay put, and the other ones are saying, no, I want to wake up. I want to know what's going on. I want the truth. I want to know why I'm here.
Right. Yeah, we can definitely see that for sure. Absolutely. I'll see some of your questions. We'll get to them. We'll be right back with Mary Rodwell. If you're on the web, go visit some of the websites, alienlady.com. Go check out the books for reference. We'll be right back.
I love magic, and on Lighting the Void, each and every week, you will get to hear shows about magic, mysticism, and many other subjects that stretch your mind and imagination. So when I got my mind on the magic and the magic on my mind, I listened to Lighting the Void on the Fringe FM. It's magic.
Neither God will look with favor upon you.
You're wondering what we're going to do to you, aren't you?
Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Somewhere between abnormal and paranormal, there's a show called Into the Paranormal. I'm Jeremy Scott. Hear me live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern on the Fringe FM.
Introducing Shadow Light Tarot from Waking Canvas, the Fringe FM's new contributing artist, Eric Tesey. This hand-illustrated black and white self-published deck serves as a reinvention of the tarot, never before witnessed. Each of the several suits of this 88-card deck lineup form an infinite panoramic scene. Even the included visual companion guidebook is entirely hand-illustrated, cover to cover, with beautiful visuals and esoteric symbols and artwork. The newly released deck comes in a custom magnetic box with its own travel pouch. The Shadow Light Tarot Premium Deck and its travel-sized mini deck, Wonderlight Tarot, are both available now from WakingCanvas.com. If you use the code word FRINGE, that's F-R-I-N-G-E at checkout, you'll receive an extra 10% off your entire order. To discover more, including a free reading and time lapses of all the illustrated artwork, make your way over to WakingCanvas.com today. That's WakingCanvas.com. We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves stripped bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137. Now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247. Now only $147 shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts. We've heard your feedback loud and clear. You called it out, and now we're answering. All new live programming, 5 nights a week. Always remember, the Fringe FM is for you, the listener, and we appreciate your feedback. Keep the feedback coming. You can email us at talkback@thefringe.fm, call the station at 501-777-5631, or send us a message on Facebook at The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Occult Arcana is a balanced and objective guide to those subjects considered a part of the nature of light and darkness. Addressed in this text is a compilation of material that will provide new perspectives and awaken latent abilities that we all possess. The content herein shall provide magical sustenance for adept and novice alike, and will help strengthen the cornerstone of mystic understanding and alchemical transmutation. If you are interested in this modern grimoire, you can find detailed information and ways to order by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. Although esoteric and occult studies remain vast, they are rooted within a universal philosophy that is difficult, if not impossible by finite terms, to explain in words. Language places restriction and erects barriers to understandings. By this it is to be understood that there are some things man should consider far too sacred to profane with definition. For these concepts and the manner by which we live our lives, we shall take a note from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. Quote, "Silence is better than unmeaning words." End quote. To get your autographed copy of Occult Arcana today, simply visit www.thesecretteachings.info or email The Secret Teachings at rdgable@yahoo.com.
This is Elle. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing this journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much for a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
And welcome back. You are listening to Lighting the Void with your host, Joseph Roop.
All right, welcome back. That's my man Michael Deacon giving us a shout out. We're here with Mary Rodwell tonight, and we're talking about the ET contact experience, hybrids, the gifts that people get when they come back. There's so many things that you touch on, Mary, and I'm glad I finally got to speak to you about this because I know you've spoken at many different conferences, and everybody pretty much knows who you are. And I can tell right now when you were talking to me earlier about how convinced you were. It's not a convincing. This is a knowing that you know now based on your experiences, based on all the people you've helped. And that's what we're big on at Lighting the Void. We like to talk about, what you've been taught in religion and history and all this other stuff could be true, but your experience is probably the most truthful thing ever in your life. And your experience, Mary, has been with all of the people that have been reporting to you about this. And I find it fascinating. And I will tell you, I don't know if that matters to you or not, but for someone like me that has a lot of questions, you are very convincing. You're helping me to open up and believe this type of stuff more, just to let you know.
Joe, I appreciate that. And the thing is, I can't be anything other than authentic, because otherwise, what on earth am I doing this? What is the point of writing books about this? What is the point of going to presentations and sharing, the research, unless I'm convinced it has integrity? I mean, I want to be seen as not only authentic, but a good researcher. But more than that, someone who's providing information that will help many people out there that are questioning their reality because they've been so programmed into this 3D reality. You can't possibly say that's real if you can't touch it, feel it, see it, smell it, etc., which is an inaccurate version of reality. It is not the truth. And unfortunately, our psychology and our psychiatry still are not owning the fact that we are not just physical beings, that we're multidimensional in nature, and that we have a spirit, we have essence, we have a soul. All of this has come to me, and you're quite right. The reason I've come from this place is because of my own journey. And, I was brought up in a religious family. And for many years, I didn't really question it very much. I was programmed into a certain dogma and whatever until that dogma told me there was no such thing as reincarnation. And I went, hold on a minute. I've just picked up a book here that someone's experience of reincarnation, everything they spoke about, they've checked out, and it's been proved to be accurate. So are they just one of these lucky people that has managed to, be accurate, or is it real? When you actually work with people, as I've done, in that altered state, and they've remembered things in other lifetimes with great detail, I might add, and with the emotion that goes with it, you have to start saying, you know what? I don't care if my religion said that reincarnation's not real. I am seeing evidence of it. I mean, I remember a beautiful minister of religion, to be honest, and I wrote a whole chapter on what I call the God chapter. Two of the ministers of religion in that God chapter, which I think is chapter 18, I think. And why I wrote about them was both of them came to the understanding that their ET experiences were real. And this particular gentleman who I did a regression with, because I remember him saying, if my bishop knew that I was coming to see you, he'd have a heart attack. And I said, well, look, he said, how are you going to convince me that this is, if I go into a past life, that it's real? I said, I won't be convincing you of anything. I said, you will decide after your experience whether or not that's real. Because I'm not there to tell people what to believe. I'm there just to help them explore something that they have a sense of. He went back into a lifetime where he was a soldier, where he was seeing something happening to someone he loved. And the emotion that came from that experience had him rocking around on the sofa. And he came out of it and he went, oh my God, and I said, well, you decide. And he said, well, I know that's real. I know now that that's absolutely real. And, this is my point, is people know from an experience whether or not that's a reality. Whether or not anyone else wants to believe it, quite honestly, is immaterial. Because I say to people, why are you letting other people tell you what's okay to be real and what's not? They have no more a mandate on reality than you have, other than your experience and what you sense and feel and what you know is your reality. And quite honestly, nobody else, I don't care if they've got 15 PhDs. I don't care if they're the best scientists, on the planet. Nobody actually fully knows what reality is, other than what we're told is what we can agree to as a reality. So you are the expert on your own experience. You're the expert on your own reality. How about you start listening to yourself rather than other people that have no right to tell you what's real and what's not real, because they know more than in their own reality, let alone telling you what you should honor as reality or not. This nonsense that we have, that it's always people outside of yourself, whether it's in books or it's in the fact they've got 10 PhDs or whatever. It doesn't matter. They are not an expert on reality, because we actually don't know what reality is anyway. We only know there's a consensus of what we call reality. So get past all of that. And then the only thing that matters is your experience and how you interpret it, how you understand it. And if you sense or know something, then that is as important as if you can see it in front of you, because there is a knowing. There's a part of you that does have a sense of things. And if you start listening to it, your life is going to make a lot more sense than if you shut it all down and just rely on your physical senses to tell you what is real.
Yeah, and to me, a real intelligent person, somebody that's real intelligent, will tell you the same thing, right? And I've had scientists that have been on the program that have said the exact same thing as you, and said, look, I only know, we only call these things this because that's what we call them, and this is what we've measured. But what's beyond that, we don't know, and that's, everybody, you would think everybody would think what you just said. It's only logical. That should be logic to me, that we don't know near as much as we think we do about all this stuff, and that we need to take our experiences and our past, it needs to be more important to us. We don't learn from our past. A lot of times as a society, we're still doing the same things politically and religious wise and all that stuff. And we don't learn from, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but it is frustrating when I see things like that. So I feel your pain, because imagine what kind of planet we would live on if everybody took that philosophy. Hey, maybe everybody's having a different experience. Let's hear everybody's story, and let's just consider everything. Everything is on the table right now,
Well, the way I look at it, and I think it's very logical, is that we've all got a bit of this huge elephant we call reality. Some of us have got the ear, some of us got the trunk, somebody's got hold of the leg, someone's got hold of the tail. We all think we know what the elephant looks like, but we don't, because we're only seeing it through a very limited window of our own personal reality and our own programming, our own belief systems that narrow that down more and more till what are we actually seeing of reality, a pinprick of what actually reality may very well be. And I think it's very unintelligent if you think that you've got the mandate. And there's a lovely quote by Albert Einstein saying, those that think they have a mandate on truth and knowledge are shipwrecked by the passport of shipwrecked by the passport of by the laughter of the gods. That's right.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that's exactly it. If we think that we are so arrogant that we know what reality is, then quite honestly, you've lost the plot. Absolutely lost the plot, because nobody for sure knows what reality is, and we may all be living on a holodeck. With this reality holodeck where we're all creating our own particular reality, and what we choose to happen, we don't know. We've got no idea.
It's funny you say that, but because a very famous NASA physicist wrote 3 books on that, actually. Thomas Campbell, I'm sure you're familiar with him. His My Big Theory of Everything, that's what he thinks, that everything is just consciousness, and that's what we're here. We're all in this video game making choices. That is a pretty fascinating concept. But I want to get back to what you were talking about with the, I guess we call them, I've heard a lot of names for them, and they got a lot of judgments when you say things like star seeds and indigo children, things like that. Now, I'm not concerned about judgments. I'm just saying that I know they're out there. But I can't help but see obvious things, and even my father has mentioned, Mary, that it seems as if we are evolving and something's happening on a faster rate. For example, like if you watch shows, and I know this is going to sound silly to some, but if you watch TV shows like America's Got Talent and all this stuff, all these new children that are coming out, there's so many talented kids that are intelligent, that can do things from birth, child prodigies, and just stuff that it wasn't that way 30 or 40 years ago. Now, I've asked my father, my uncle, and a lot of people about that. I said, were there this many people that could do these things? Or is it just because they got a TV show about it? And my dad's pretty much told me that he thinks that something's going on, and he's a non-believer in a lot of things. But something is going on. We're being pushed, aren't we?
Joe, you're absolutely right. And what came to my research was that I was noticing that each generation that had had experiences, because it does go through family lines, was that bit more aware, that bit more awake. And what came to me was when the latest, parents would say, my child's autistic or my child's got ADHD, I kept wondering then, well, if they're upgrading humans, why is somebody then having a child that's got autism or ADHD? And I'm talking about certain forms of autism, not all autism, some forms of autism, like Asperger's, dyslexia, et cetera. And I thought, well, if they're upgrading, so how can that then be that they appear to be dysfunctional? And then the clues came, and there always seems to be that light bulb moment. One of them was when I was in Hong Kong talking to a lovely guy who's a ufologist and researcher, Neil Gold. And Neil told me, he was in his 50s then, and he said to me, Mary, I didn't realize I was ADHD until I was in my 50s. He said, but I always saw the complexity of reality in a way nobody else seemed to be able to see it. And he said, and I didn't know that was weird or that was strange. he said, I realize now that this is a property of what ADHD is. And he redefined ADHD as always dialed into higher dimensions, because that is what we're seeing. They operate, their brain works faster. That's why they get bored at school, because everything's pedestrian to them, because they're operating on a higher frequency. So they get bored, they want new things, and they're operating continually on that other level. Unless, of course, we do what is the standard here on this planet. We dope them all up and shut them down so that they can then go at the pedestrian strength of everybody else that's so-called normal. But the bottom line is they're an upgrade. They are wired differently. And why are they wired differently? And that was another question. Okay, so if we're getting a new kind of human, what would they need to do to help assist us to move forward or evolve more into a higher awareness? Well, first of all, stop the programming that shuts us down, which is third dimensional programming. So if you can't be programmed so easily, you are then going to stay more in your higher dimensional state, your higher awareness state. And this is why I think the whole point of it is that if this is why dyslexics are wired differently, and certain, Asperger's, because they're wired differently, they can't be programmed into the old model of reality, the old consensus reality, because it's not accurate, because we're multidimensional. So we need to have different wiring. And the best way to stop you being reprogrammed is to make it so it's harder to reprogram you. So if you can realize that, to me, it made absolute sense that they would have to wire us differently if they wanted an upgrade human that wasn't going to be put back in the box, which a lot of the older generations like myself were put in, because everything was about what you can touch, feel, and our senses without our multidimensional senses. As you're going weird, you're hearing voices, or, all this weird psychic stuff and what have you. How funny is that? So everything is meant to shut that down, when in fact we should be opening that up, because then we're whole. We're actually, as we should be, both physical and non-physical in nature, which is us in balance.
Yeah, I don't know what to say, because I totally agree with you on that 100%. When did this start happening, do you think? And what I say, when did this start happening? I mean, like the real big push, because some people believe that just now we're getting indigo children and star seeds, and other people say, no, it goes back to even before the 50s. And, I wonder about myself just as you're speaking. I'm sure other people do, because there's so many people out there that have had ADHD like I have, and was told that they were trouble and ended up actually in gifted and talented class. That's what happened to me, because my dad hired someone to go to the school and test me to find out what was really going on. And that's exactly what was going on. I would get super bored, right? And once they figured that out, then they put me in a different class. I don't know. I'm just wondering when this stuff started, or has it always been happening?
I think they've gone into overload with accelerating the evolutionary status of us because of the technology. And I think as soon as we started to have technology that could destroy the planet and affect them, they realized they had to do a very fast upgrade. And this is why you're getting the indigos, the crystals, the children of, there's lots of rainbow children. All that is a frequency. One name that, the metaphysicians call it. But, the truth is, let's look at autism, for example. In 1975, it was 1 in 5,000. Now, this year, it's 1 in 35. That's just, with autism. And this has to tell you something. There's something amazing and incredible going on. And we're not going to get into, some of them have been orchestrated artificially, and that's a whole different ball game, and we won't get into that. But the ones that have been born with various, like Asperger's and what have you, I think the reason it's exploded is because it's had to, because we've reached a point in technology where we can destroy ourselves, and they've got to stop that happening. We've got to now upgrade people in an evolutionary way spiritually, so that we understand. Otherwise, it's like a 3-year-old with a loaded gun who doesn't understand the loaded gun can kill people. We've got to reach a point in our spiritual evolution that matches the technology. And this is why there's been this explosion of what I call the new human. And interestingly, I'm accessed by psychologists, clinical psychologists, educators, parents that are actually aware of this and say, what do we do? How do we help them, Mary, when in mainstream, I can't say that I accept that this is what this is related to, but we're noticing these huge changes in children. And so we've got many professionals that are aware that don't quite know what to do, because how do you explain that in mainstream when mainstream is not even aware that we are interacting with non-human intelligences, or at least that not officially at any rate. So you've got this real problem that unless we get the truth out there, all of this is put to the if you like, is kept fairly secret and almost not okay. But something has to change, because these kids are everywhere and they're challenging the system. And you're quite right. We're seeing 10-year-olds sing like opera singers, and they're 10 years old. These are the new kids coming in with that higher frequency, that higher awareness, and they're here to help us shift in terms of our evolution. They're part of the evolution of the human. And this is what really is the hopeful thing, is they're everywhere and they will make a difference to this planet.
Good. You can definitely see that we're going through some birthing pains for sure. But I can't believe, honestly, that we're already halfway through the show. Listen, we're halfway through the show. You guys, I'll get to your questions in the chat. I forgot to last time, but I see some of them. I also see a few text messages here. Yeah. So we'll be right back with Mary Rodwell. Please don't go anywhere.
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Right, me old Chiners. I know it's an ad break, but before you lot shoot off and make yourself a cup of Rosie Lee or whatever else it is you're going to sling down your Gregory Peck, you need to listen to me bubble. If, like me, you found your way to Light in the Void via a downloadable podcast, you might want to take a butcher's at the Fringe FM Wind and Kite. You won't Adam and Eve how many other shows there are or what they rabbit on about. Ancient history, conspiracy, the consciousness, the esoteric, the occult, metaphysics, parapolitical, ufology, technology and spirituality, to name but a few. They got featured hosts like Ryan Gable, Jeremy Scott, Alex Exum, Tim Doyle, Cortana and Gigi, Susanna Ross, the Reverend John Polk, Michael Deacon and J.D. Lewis. You might find yourself listening to the thoughts and theories of the author of The Fish you just finished reading. Or you could pick up the dog and bone, call in and tell everyone your own beliefs or experiences. So do me a favour, before you put on the Ansel or crack open a bottle of vino or roll a joint, go to the Fringe FM and see what you're missing.
You're listening to the Fringe FM, and I'm Michael Deacon reminding you can find my show right here on the Fringe FM every Sunday night at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time, or by going to michaeldeacon.com. The choice is yours.
Parabnormal News. I'm Brad Bernards. Etched across the sky, long white lines reveal the high-altitude paths airplanes take to their destinations. But that's not all these vapor trails signify. Most of the concern about air travel's environmental impact focuses on aviation's gigantic carbon footprint. But new research serves as an alarming reminder of how harmful airplane contrails themselves are. Not to be confused with the conspiracy theory of chemtrails, contrails, aka condensation trails, are very real, and they're very impactful in terms of global warming processes. A study in 2011 calculated that the heat-trapping potential of contrail cirrus is actually greater than that of carbon emissions produced by airplanes. It's a disturbing outlook, given most of the world's efforts to combat aviation's environmental impacts are squarely addressed at limiting CO2 emissions. The study shows we can't afford to ignore a comprehensive view of how aviation as a whole is affecting the climate. According to a new study conducted by a team at the University of Colorado Boulder, the clouds that form Mars' thin atmosphere are caused by meteors. Meteor smoke, which is icy dust that is left behind when a meteor burns up in Mars' atmosphere, is what partially creates the cirrus-looking clouds that are positioned around 18 miles above the planet's surface. Some clouds here on Earth are formed by particles, such as grains of dust or sea salt, that are carried into the air by the wind, and then the water molecules condense around them, which causes the clouds to form and grow. Mars, on the other hand, has barely any particles floating around since the atmosphere is so thin, but when small meteors enter Mars' atmosphere, they often burn up, which creates fine dust or meteor smoke, which are the particles needed for clouds to develop. While the Martian clouds are much too weak and the atmosphere is too thin to produce rain, snow did fall close to the North Pole in 2008 and was witnessed by the Phoenix Mars lander. Find all of tonight's stories at paranormalradio.com. I'm Brad Bernard's Parabnormal News.
Hello, this is Vance Nesbitt. Take the time to expand your mind by listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop right here on The Fringe FM.
Hi, this is Aaron Hunter, host of Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
I really like that track. It kind of reminds me of the old school Knight Rider, being a child of the 80s. That's what it sounds like to me. Listen, tonight we're here with Mary Rodwell. Tomorrow night on the program, Grimerica will be joining us. And we've got some more fantastic guests on this week. You can go check out the website at lightingthevoid.com. We've got all of the upcoming guests. We're kind of changing stuff there so everybody can see what's coming down the road. But as I said before, tonight, Mary Rodwell is with us, and I finally got to speak with her, and it's been exactly as I've thought it would be, Mary, and I'm totally convinced on a lot of this stuff now. It's just, you know, like I was saying before, when we bring up terms like starseed and indigo child, when I first heard those things, I thought, you know, this is cuckoo stuff, right? This doesn't make sense to me. Star seeds and indigo children, but when you really look at it, all you got to do is step back and look at the evolution of humanity, especially in the last 50 years, and the way that children are. You've brought it up earlier. We think a lot of these, what we call diseases, they're probably not diseases. They're just part of the upgrades. You can see that something's happening. I mean, I think the internet got here so all of us would be able to do what we're doing right now. Right? I mean, do you ever look at it like that way, Mary, about technology?
Oh, I'm convinced everything is almost orchestrated from some level. I think the problem is when you use special language, whether it's from New Age or metaphysical, or whether you want to look at it from the conventional 3D, you have to look at what's behind the language. And you know, when we talk about things like indigo, all that really says is that person has a different frequency to somebody else. That's all it's saying. And if you're talking about, you know, crystal children, it's a different frequency. All that's saying to me is they're different programs. different programs of human with different abilities. And one of the ones with the indigo, they're supposed to be a warrior type. In other words, they've come to help break down the system that's inaccurate and isn't truthful to what our reality is. And it's a way of breaking the system down. Some of the others with different frequencies come in as a healer. So they're empaths and they're extremely empathic. In fact, it's very hard for them sometimes because they're so empathic. They make great healers, but it makes them very hard for them to switch down or switch off because they're empathic. So when we understand it from that level, it's actually quite, sensible. It's quite practical in the way we're looking at it. And the way that I looked at ADHD and what I was told by Neil and others, how they see more of the matrix, then that made absolute sense too, because, as he said, always dialed into higher dimensions. He's able to perceive them and make sense of them, which a more limited programmed human can't, because they've shut down or they've been shut down through the programming and whatever. So it's all actually very logical, as Spock would say. To me, I'm a pretty logical kind of person, that to me, that's just connecting the dots that make sense to me about this all. The language is really often the limiter, because as soon as you start using fancy language, then you're going to preclude most people from understanding it. And for me, it's saying, and I've got a number of professionals that I've talked to that are also one of these new, Dr. Lena Olsson is a molecular biologist in Sweden, who's a good friend of mine. She's a scientist, but she's also what she calls herself as a letter person. And by letter person, she means the ADHD, a bit of Asperger's, a bit of dyslexic. That's what she calls a letter person, which makes absolute sense. And what she's done is she not only understood herself, she said, I've got more sensitivity for touch in my skin. I'm able to hear a greater frequency with hearing because I'm an upgrade. She's a greater sense of taste, and not only hearing, but sight, seeing a greater spectrum of light, for example. So those are the upgrade parts of the letter person, or the ADHD, for example, or, these other ones we're talking about. So the reason they struggle sometimes is because of their higher sensitivity, which is because they're more tapped into their multidimensional cells. And then you've got to say, well, how can you help them? And that was what I wrote about too. It's no good just isolating what is the difficulties that they have and how they're different. How can you help them? Well, you can start by helping them by giving them more of what they need. And Dr. Olson, as a molecular biologist, found herself looking at certain vitamins they need more of. They need more of vitamin Bs, for example. There are certain things they use more of physically to help sustain them. So she's looked at the diet. She's looked at things that don't help. So more of organics, the more certain vitamins are needed. And all of this I put in to my book, The New Human, for a very good reason. It wasn't enough to say this is how they're different. What do they need to stabilize them and help them operate in the best kind of way? Well, they need certain more of these vitamin Bs. They need more of this particular vitamin and whatever, because they actually use more of it. And the science is there. Really important to have the science, because we want to understand this isn't airy-fairy. This is very grounded. This is very down to earth. This is about a human body that's operating at a higher frequency. It needs more of certain things. Avoid things that don't do, like, the sweet, sugary drinks and all those kinds of things, because they don't do you any good, even if you're the old model human, for example. So they certainly don't do any good to these new sensitive new humans that are operating, and then they'll get allergies and all these kinds of things, because it doesn't work for that higher upgraded physical body that they have. So this is how you start to know what you can do to help the kids. I've even looked at a different kind of schooling, and I've worked with a number of educators. One of them, with her PhD, said, I'm seeing these kids everywhere. They need a different kind of schooling to the one where we just program in to the 3D. They need to have an environment where they're more open and able to use their creativity and their awareness to actually operate fully. So we've got to, if you're going to embrace the difference, what do we do about that difference? How do we best support them if they're our future, if you want to acknowledge that? And I know many parents are seeing their children as different, and they're saying to me, Mary, they're telling me about this, or they're explaining that. And I'm talking about real complex things, when you've got children talking about being shown other planets, explained how they are aware at night they're being taken and being shown how to use their clairvoyant abilities, their psychic abilities, for example, and how they know what they understand about those abilities. When you're hearing children from various countries, and I mean, it's not just Australia, it's in America, it's in, Central, I'm talking and working with a therapist in Germany who's saying these kids are coming to her via parents saying that they're, what they're aware of their origins. They're aware of why they've come to this planet. One 10-year-old in England told his mom that he came through a portal in the sun, that it's another dimension. There are a number of those that I write about in The New Human that are saying they've come from other dimensions. One interesting young 9-year-old was explaining that he can travel as far as the 9th dimension. He said the grey beings can only go as far as the 6th dimension. And he said he can actually go through portals into other planets as long as he knows their mathematical number. What he's meaning by that, of course, is the frequency. So you have to look at what they're saying and understand it in adult terms. What's that saying through physics or whatever? But this is how they talk about it. They naturally just mention it. And I remember an 8-year-old saying to me when he's on board craft, he's there with a number of children learning how to use his abilities, where they're creating things holographically and being taught complex things. And I said to him, okay, so you say that they're complex. Can you tell me what you mean? What kind of complex things? And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, it's too complex to tell you. In other words, Mary, you are not going to understand what I tell you. Now, this is an 8-year-old speaking to me face to face and
That's
saying
amazing.
It's too complex for you.
Do their parents bring them to you? Is that how that happens? Like their parents say, my kid is just talking about this wild stuff. And I think it's what you're talking about, Mary. I want to bring them to you. Is that what happens?
Some will actually come and see me if they're able to. Others I talk to over Skype. And when I've gone overseas, sometimes I've had the odd course for parents and children where they come to a certain location and we have a workshop. I remember a gorgeous little 7-year-old that I spoke to when I was actually near Portland in Washington State. And that was a special group of parents and children from, I think, 9 up to 16. But one of them was a 7-year-old, and he had been part of his family. They'd all come together, and he wanted to talk to me on his own. He wasn't comfortable talking in the group. And he said to me a few things. One of them was that he told me he could speak Dolphin, which he said, do you want to hear it, Mary? And I said, oh, yeah. And he did all the clicks that a dolphin does. But the thing that was really powerful was, says, Mary, I know when people are lying and when they tell the truth. And I said to him, so how do you know when someone's lying to you? And how do you know when someone's telling the truth? I said, what do you feel? And he said, when they're lying, I go all cold. And when they tell the truth, I feel warm. So he explained to me how he interprets the truth against something that's not the truth. And this is a 7-year-old. So, you work with what their language is because they don't always know how to articulate what it is they're experiencing and whatever. But, the fascinating thing is with one of the recent 10-year-olds, when he told me he came from another planet, and I said, so what did you look like? And he actually sent me a drawing of what he was, a blue being with certain kind of symbols on one leg, which he explained what the symbols were. But he was literally this blue humanoid being. And when he talked about the planet, and he said, this is my first time on planet Earth. He said, but my mum's been here many times, so she's helping me because I'm not used to being human. So that's not language you get normally from a 10-year-old.
Absolutely not.
It's just not normal language. And I'm a grandmother. I've had 3 kids, adult kids. I've got 5 grandchildren. I know how children talk at certain ages. And I love kids anyway. So for me, you know when someone's talking from that kind of awareness and whether or not they're just making up. And the parents know this too. When you've got a child interpreting certain drawings, I mean, one of the most fascinating was a 7-year-old, and the mother wrote to me because she'd got my book Awakening, and in it is a script that was written by an experiencer called Tracy Taylor. And she happened to just be reading it. Her daughter glanced and saw what her mum was reading and said, "I can read that, Mum." And it was like these symbols. And the mother said, "Oh, can you?" "Yes," she said. And she proceeded to interpret the symbols. So the mother got in touch with me. She lives in Australia, and she got in touch and said, "My daughter says that she can read the symbols in your book Awakening." So I said, "Right, could I talk to her?" And the mother was really good. She said, "Yeah, she's quite happy to talk to you." Or, a 7-year-old, very, very competent and very confident. She's there on the other side of a screen, and I'm saying, "Mum tells me that you can read the symbols in this book." "Oh, yes," she said. I said, "Could you do that for me?" "Oh, yes." So she said, "Do you want it in the language or do you want it in English?" So I said, "Can you do both?" She said, "Oh, yes." So she proceeds to articulate this in this, what we call this, light language or star language or whatever name you want to give it. And she said it in the language, and then she translated it into English. And then after that, I said to her, "Do you know the source of that language?" And she said, "Oh, yes, it comes from the Greys." Now, this is a 7-year-old translating in the language that she knows, translating it into English, and even knowing the source of it. And that didn't end. A few weeks later, I saw her with a group, and I had a whole file full of different symbols, and which are different kinds of languages that people start to come through people who've had encounters. And I said, "Can you read any of these?" And she went through and said, "I can't read all of them." She said, "But I can this one." She picked one out. You could see her reading it diagonally. And she said, "Again, do you want it in the language or do you want it in English?" I said, "Can you do both?" She said, "Yes." She proceeded to read it in the language. She then translated it. And I said, "So what was the source of this language?" And she said, "That's the Zetas and that's the Mantis." So she picked out 2 species that she said contributed to that information. Now, we're talking about a 7-year-old doing this, that did it spontaneously, as I asked her. Now, who can do that normally? Certainly not a 7-year-old.
I've talked to some 7-year-olds that have blown me away with their intelligence, but not like that. Not anything like that. But I know they're there, like they exist. I'll give you an example, like what you're talking about, and they weren't talking alien stuff with me, but it made me think that we're evolving, right? Because I sat down with a 6-year-old, which was a friend of mine's daughter in Dallas, Texas, and I was reading a book to her like she was a toddler almost, right? And you know how you do that, right? You show the picture to the kid. Well, she gave me this really mean look, Mary, and I said, "What's the matter?" She goes, "I'm not stupid, And I said, "What?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "That animal comes from," and I forget all the details, but she was like, "This whale comes from this side of the country and it's home to this ocean." Just started giving me all of these scientific details. And I turned to her mother and I was like, "She's 5, right? Or 6. Yeah. Doesn't matter. It just blew me away. And I keep running into that more and more. And it just feels to me like I mentioned before, something is definitely pushing us along. And a lot of people have credited it to, well, we've got more resources, we've got Khan Academy and the internet, but I don't think that's it. I mean, even if we have all these things, they're still more intelligent. They're still evolved,
You're absolutely right, Joe. And this is why so many are contacting me, not just the parents, but also educators that are contacting me because they're recognizing these children. And also some of these clinical psychologists that are working with children, all of them have gotten awareness there's some bigger picture going on. And they're recognizing from the same perspective of myself. And I was fascinated by that because I still think, I'm on the fringes of what they call the weird and the wonderful. And you never expect people from the more conventional areas of our paradigm to contact you. But there are many people in those fields that are having experiences and are recognizing something that was like them. Only they've ended up with the PhDs or, whatever thing they get drawn into. But the bottom line is they know there's a bigger picture. I've even had midwives contact me who said that they're there to give birth to these new kids, that they are a different frequency, and that, you know, they're midwives. Lots of nurses have had experiences, lots of them, because they're drawn into healing because of their experiences. And so, you know, they're already aware that there's a bigger picture for them and for lots of other people. So it is happening. There is a whole shift in consciousness going on right now. And the children are showing us this, but so are many of the adults that are finally honoring what they feel rather than getting, you know, trapped in the old paradigm that says you can't have these experiences unless you're crazy.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to get to, I got so many of my own questions. I'm sorry. Okay. So I've got a text message here that says, Mary, how can we get to be able to have our own contactee experience? I'm trying to interpret it because the text message is messed up, but I think what they're asking is what can we do to try to have this happen to us on purpose? Like get in touch with where we're from or whoever's watching over us or what family or star system that we're from. Are there any techniques that you would recommend or anything like that?
It's a good question, and I'm asked it a lot. First of all, the mere fact you're listening to this kind of information is going to affect you. The more that you are open to this kind of data is a frequency, and it will actually start doing that. It'll start activating you. The other thing is that the mere intent that you have, that you want to change, that you want to evolve, is also part of the way that you'll get activated. You'll be drawn to things. You'll notice synchronicities. All those kinds of things are part of it happening for you. The other thing is, as I say, go into a nice quiet space when you're relaxing and put it out there. I want to be part of this awakening. I want to be part of this evolution. The mere fact that you intend that is part of your consciousness reaching out to be part of all of this. It really isn't, you know, this isn't rocket science. This is, you know, you're your own creator. You're creating very much part of what you want to experience. So the more you put out to that consciousness of the greater consciousness, which we're all part of, the more that it will open up for you. Reading the books that lift your spirits, make you feel hopeful, all of those are frequencies. It really isn't hard. Just go with what you feel and what draws you to whatever the information is. That is really the start of it all.
I think you're right about that, because that's the only time I've had the one big experience I told you about during the break is when I was drawn to the information, because I've tried I don't know, I'm not saying they don't work, but the CE5 books, I've read 2 of them so far, and I've tried both of the techniques and stuff, and they don't work for me. But anytime I get trapped, or not trapped, but locked into somebody's experience when they're telling me a story, and I can tell they're telling me the truth, then it's funny. Then things start happening for me. So maybe it all happens for us different too. That could be another thing. Yeah, I got to take a break here, but so what about the bad stuff? And I don't like focusing on the bad stuff too much, but I know some people are thinking about it. There is always that question of, are the aliens bad, or are they good? Are we, because, you know, you've heard people say, well, they're really talking to demons and things like that. And you go, no, that sounds crazy. Well, how do we know? How do we know who has good intention, or if we're not just, you know, mice in a cage, so to speak? You know what I mean?
I do, and maybe it will require more than a couple of minutes to explain the difference in terms of whether what you're interacting with is a loving being that is trying to help you evolve and to grow, and one that's trying to manipulate you in some way or another. And there are some very simple ways that you can get to work that out. And, you know, I don't know when we have to stop, because I know that we'll be going into the.
Yeah, let's take a break right here, and then we'll come back with that and have Mary explain that, and we'll only have a few more minutes. So get your questions in. Also, I keep forgetting to bring up the number, but it's 1-800-588-0335 if you want to call into the broadcast. Also, go check out the website. We're updating it, as I mentioned before. We've been updating it for a while now, but I'm hoping by this time next week it'll fully be done. But it's got all the contact info there, all of the ways that you can support the show. It's all there. We'll be right back with Mary Rodwell.
This is Sammy. Join us in the Deep South as we're lighting the void with Joe Roop on the Fringe FM.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? CannaSense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. CannaSense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the costs, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and CannaSense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
Ahoy there, Gigi here from Shift Happens. Do you like to boogie down to topics such as ufology, the occult, and the mysteries behind our reality? Well, I invite you to join us every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific, that's 10 p.m. Eastern, as we like to punch that curiosity button and tickle that fancy. We tickle that fancy, but yeah, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but there's certainly a lot of tickling going on over here at Shift Happens.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
AncientLifeOil.com. For your CBD needs, just remember, AncientLifeOil.com. What does it do for the body, you ask? I can't say to the people in the suits that run the industry. Big Pharma's all over CBD because of its well, you know what I mean. Research the benefits of CBD on Google and come back to AncientLifeOil.com and purchase your CBD today. Non-GMO and all organic. You don't want to be using a petroleum product. You want to be using the cleanest CBD product on the market. AncientLifeOil.com. We even have CBD for your pet. Help your pet's discomfort. Help your discomfort. Log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Newly reduced prices to pass off the savings to the most important person. You. AncientLifeOil.com. And one more thing. We have topicals too. So if you have joint pain and some different issues that are going on in your body, you might want to use a topical. Think about it. AncientLifeOil.com.
Alex Exum.
This is Alex Exum of the Exum Experience in Live Talk, where we discuss current events, society, and culture. My shows are based in actuality, actual existence, contrasted with what was intended, expected, or believed. You can listen to me live Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 7 p.m. only on KTLK, The Fringe FM.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm. Or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
When I'm done running with the wolves after hunting down a half-ton bison, I look forward to a mind-teetering escapade evening on The Fringe FM.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, me old china plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Light in the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your northern self and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you beat a Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Tonight we're speaking with Mary Rodwell, and before the break we were talking about how can we figure out how do we better contact these, I guess, our beings, the higher selves, whatever star family we're from, and also how can we tell what's bad and what's good, what doesn't have a very good agenda for us. I guess that's a way to put it, because I don't want to say certain things are evil because I don't know. And how do we better contact with the beings that love us or are there for our own goodness? And we're getting into that, but we saved it until we came back. So go ahead, Mary.
It's a very important one for a lot of people who are frightened because they don't know what's going on. And part of the reason they're frightened may just be because they don't know what's going on and they need more information. So, it doesn't necessarily mean the beings are bad. It just means that they're scared because they haven't yet worked out what on earth is happening. There's some important things with this. When people say to me, I've been told these are bad and these are good and what have you. The problem with that is that that's somebody else's experience. It isn't yours. And what I say to people is trust your own feelings about a being rather than trust somebody else. So start trusting your own awareness, just like the 7-year-old was saying he knew what was good and what was bad in terms of truth and not truth. You've got a way of working that out as well.
Oh, yeah.
Start trusting that. For example, in human terms, if you've got two friends, there'll be one where you go to that friend and every time you leave that friend, you're exhausted and feel worn out. There'll be another friend that always makes you feel good and you leave them and you're always pleased you went to go to see them. Which one do you want to go and visit the most? The one that makes you feel good and whatever. The friend that makes you feel exhausted is telling you something. It's not particularly necessarily a good friend because they're wearing you out and they're taking your energy. So the same thing with these kinds of beings. You've got a sense from them. What are they doing with me? Is this something that feels right or doesn't feel right? And that's part of you then working out whether or not they're positive or not positive in terms of how you are interacting with them. But you've also got to understand that you may not have the full picture. And one of the things that's been very important when I take people into regression and they're seeing, for example, themselves on a table and they see these procedures being done, if they don't have an awareness of what's actually happening, they're going to see that as bad because here's this being doing this stuff to me, how dare they, etc. But there is another level where you can get them to access awareness on, okay, so what are they doing? And there's another level that they can get the information. And with that, they can then know what's actually happening. And they may say, I'm being told that this is a medical procedure to help me with an injury that I've had or whatever. And I'll say to them, does this make sense to you? Well, yes, it does, actually. So in fact, what they're doing is trying to help you. Well, actually, yes, it is. They would have not known that if they hadn't gone to that place and asked the question. So we have the ability often to access information about an experience that we, previously did not have an understanding of. So we've got to be careful what we judge. Just because a being looks a bit ugly to us doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It just means it's different. So what you've got to do is get a sense of, is this a loving being or not? And you will know, just like you know the good friends from the ones that are using you and whatever. It's the same deal. There's no difference. What is it that, when someone comes to your front door and they, what is it that stops you from letting some people come in and the others you're inviting in for a cup of coffee? There's a feeling, this is safe, this is not safe. Start trusting that, because that's telling you a great deal. Yes, I do believe there are beings that are self-serving, just like there are humans that are self-serving. And so how do I ascertain that? You ascertain it by what you're feeling, you're sensing, you're knowing. That is giving you a pretty good guidance on the same way the little boy knew who was telling him the truth, who was not telling him the truth. There are two things about beings that interact with you that will give you a pretty good idea that they're not necessarily looking after you. One of them is if they use fear and try and scare you to death. The other one is if they're trying to use your ego and play with your ego and tell you how brilliant you are all the time, because that's actually not a very high frequency. The ones that are for your benefit will actually be loving, supporting, caring, just in the same way your best friend is. So it really isn't rocket science. It really is about you starting to trust what you're sensing about this. And the more that you try to understand, the more you will understand. It's like, I need to understand this more. So that intent is what will draw whatever it is to you. The other thing I will say to many people that say, well, why do they have to scare the living daylights out of me first? If you know anything about shamanism, the reason, the way people become a shaman is that they face their human fears so that they can interact in a multidimensional, non-physical reality without being scared. So you've got, it's like a modern day shamanic wake-up call. You're going through your human fears to work out what it is that you can face in the multidimensional world. So you have to go through human fears, and human fears are what hold us back from everything that we do. As soon as you start to allow that to control you, you stay in your box. So many people are, what do we get on this planet? Everything's going to get you. If it's not an illness, if it's not, the government, if it's not whatever it is, there's so many things out to get you on this planet. It's unreal, isn't it? What that does is make sure that you don't do anything you really want to do because it's scary. And that's how it keeps you in the box. Well, what I believe the higher beings are trying to do is to get us out that box. And the way is that they're getting us to face our fears and transcend them. And people that get past challenges, as you've well known many times, is the person, there's two ways to look at everything. You can look at it as a way, it's horrible, it's bad, and it's evil. Or you can say, how can I grow from that experience? Everyone has a choice to look at it from those perspectives. And a lot of these fear-based things, and I'll give a quick example of that, is a gentleman who was very comfortable with his UFO experiences. But the one thing he could never quite deal with was when one of these black eyes came towards him. He said, it's terrifying. I go into shock every time I think about it. And he said, I want to know what they're doing. And I said, well, what do you think they're doing? He said, well, I think they're taking me over. He says, but I want to find out. So I said, okay. And I took him into hypnosis, and he could see this eye coming closer and closer, and his whole body was getting all stiff and tense, and he was getting more and more freaked out. And I said, it's all right. Nothing's happened yet. It's just getting closer. So I'm helping him get closer and closer as this eye is getting closer. He's getting more and more anxious. And he's got to the point where the eye is almost in front of him, to the point of him absolutely getting freaked. And then suddenly his whole body relaxes. So I said, so what happened? And I said, did the being take you over? And he said, oh, no. All it was doing was giving me information. So that fear that he had was a fear of what he thought was happening rather than what actually happened. So sometimes our fears are what we create and not necessarily what's happening with the being itself. So you have to isolate that as well. So when I say to somebody, what do you fear? It's trying to work out whether that's a fear of the unknown or whether it's a fear of what they're doing to me. And I'm not saying that something may not be really traumatic and really scary that's happened to them. It may very well be that way, but sometimes it's our own fear. So it's about finding out what that fear is and what can you do about that fear. So that, it's quite a complex thing, the whole fear thing, but certainly in terms of the beings, if you want to understand what that being is meaning to you, is from the way that it's interacting with you. If it's feeling loving, if it's feeling caring, if it feels supportive, then it's probably all of those things, because that's what you're feeling. When you're with someone who wishes you well against somebody who doesn't wish you well. Right. It's an energetic thing. It's a feeling. It really isn't, rocket science. It really is as simple as that.
That kind of reminds me of when I was a kid and I was around certain dogs all the time, because I had to dodge so many neighborhood dogs riding my bike around, But you could tell when a dog came up to you, even if it wasn't growling, sometimes some of them wouldn't growl. They would just look at you, but you could tell if something was up with it, right? Like, that's not a good dog to mess with. I totally get what you're saying, but it feels, and I appreciate you saying that, but in real life, that seems as a bit of a curse to me sometimes, because I have that. I can pick up when somebody's manipulating me or just trying to use me for their own agenda, and that's it, right? And I know it without any clues or anything. I can just tell, and I come off wrong to those people, and it's hard. That's what I wonder about, Mary. Like, all of these beings and advanced beings that you talk about, do you think they're going to have an easy life? Because right now it's not easy for them out there. They don't relate to the world very well. They're kind of angry and frustrated at the way things are. You know what I mean? Do you think it's going to get any better for these types of beings?
If you're talking about the new generations that are hypersensitive, hyper-aware, right, like yourself, and tune in, they've come in to make a difference on this planet. They've come in to break out of a system that's broken. I don't think anyone will disagree that our world needs sorting out, both from every level, from what we're doing to the planet, how we're polluting it, how we're treating, the animals, what we're doing as a species. There's so much that needs to be sorted. And I believe these new generations have come in to help us get things back to in balance again. And so they're going to be upset at what's going on here. And they need to be, because the only way you change anything is to be upset enough to change it. I mean, human nature is, until your back's against the wall, you don't do anything. You carry on thinking, it'll change next year, or change, unless we get that kind of catalyst that says, enough already, I'm going to do something about this. And so they've come in with these abilities, with this awareness, because they can tell who's lying to them. They know that we're not alone. They know things need to change. One of the young men told me he was from Arcturus, and he's an ecological engineer. He's come in to help us create habitat to be in harmony with the planet. This is the kind of awareness these new kids have. They know what their mandate is. The 8-year-old told me that he can communicate with animals, and he's here to help us understand that they're conscious beings and we have to treat them with respect. Yes, it's hard for them right now. And the more of us that understand that they're here to help the planet are here also to help them to a point where they can start to do what they've come here to do. So the more awake we are to our children and to these new generations, the more we support them, the more chance they have of doing what they've come here to do. And it's an important one where you say, well, I know what feels safe and what's not safe. We need to have that awareness. Otherwise, we're just going to be railroaded. We have to be able to discern. All of this is about resonance. When you talk about, when I talk, that it resonates with you, that is really important, that information is something that you think, well, that fits for me, that resonates. We need to have that resonance to information, because so much is out there that's not true. We all know that. The fake, all this this different bits of information, the propaganda, everything that's put through in these different mediums. What's true, what's not true? If we don't have that bullshit meter inside us that says this is not right, if we don't have that, what chance have we got? So it's actually a really positive thing, even if it's uncomfortable. But we've come here to make a difference, all of us. Every one of us that's waking up and who's listening to this program has come because they're ready to hear this, and they know that this has to change.
Good answer. Yeah, thank you. I'm looking in the Fringe FM chat, and a few people want to know that you were talking about the kids knowing the meaning of the symbols, and they were wondering if you, Mary, knew the meaning of what the kids were interpreting, and if she had any idea if it was correct. Like, could you interpret what the children were saying?
I have to be honest, I didn't, although they told me, obviously, the message, and it was often about ecology and what have you, but I do know some that speak the star languages that communicate and understand each other. And one was a 9-year-old boy with his mother, and his mother admitted to me that her son speaks to her in light language. She answers him in light language, but she said, my son knows exactly what he's saying, and I don't fully understand because I just get the sense of it. So there's a communication going with two speaking the same language, but the son being a lot more aware, although not all languages anyway spoken as star languages are translatable, I was told. Some of them are like complex files of information, if you like, that can't be translated, are, if you like, a kind of software. So not everything can be translated, but there are those that can communicate with these languages and understand each other. And that's been something that I've discovered over the last few years. Even though I personally can't do it, I can sometimes get a sense of things, but I'm not a translator. I usually say to people, what is your sense of what you're saying? Because often they may have a sense. Some of them actually know, though, exactly what they're saying. Those are those that I suppose are a little bit more aware.
Yeah. That makes me think of, in the opening of the show, I've got Terrence McKenna talking about how he interpreted, and, he did his journeys through obviously DMT or a substance, but still, I think he had an experience, and I think that he talked to certain beings, but he interpreted that that the message was that we are beings from some type of limitless light and that we matter. And that's all that he knew. But that he did say that sometimes these beings could, and he even did this on stage, he would do some type of language in tongues that no one knew what he was saying, but this is what he remembered these beings that said to him, and that they would create things based on the frequencies that were coming out of their mouth. And he would try to explain it, but he said, you have to remember that what I'm explaining to you is just a filter. I can't fully explain what happened. Do you get that a lot too from children and others?
Absolutely, because not all can be translatable. That's what they told me. Only certain ones can be understood in a linear way, in the way that we speak. Others are almost like this little boy was saying how he understood how dolphins communicate through pictures rather than through what we would call a linear type language. It's a kind of picture way that is their communication primarily. So we've got to understand there's more than one way to communicate. But I do think those that are waking up and start to get activated is they are able to pick up more about that information. I mean, I've been told by people when they've picked up one of my books that they can feel the frequencies in it. They can actually feel them. So, even the written word appears to have a frequency, which is, if you think about it, it is, we know that nothing is actually solid, that it's just a frequency that appears solid. Right. So everything in every word that's in there is a frequency, and so if you think about it, it's not so weird. It actually makes a lot of sense that you can feel or pick up the frequencies in certain books, for example. And frequency is how we're being upgraded. And whether it's through their music after they've had contact, or their artwork, or the scripts, or the star languages, or information, that is a frequency that, if you're ready, will activate you. And it's all about whether or not you're ready to be activated. And I think that's a combination of your soul purpose, why you've come here, and whether in fact that's part of, as a 15-year-old hybrid told me, it was actually her activation into being aware of her hybrid nature was at 15. It was encoded in her DNA. And so when it got activated through frequency, she was aware of where she was from. And I think this is what's going on right now.
And we've only got a few minutes left with you. What I'm curious about is some of your services and your books as well, but can you talk to me about the inner alchemy meditations? What's that about?
Because I'm a therapist and I do hypnosis, I created a whole series of meditations, creative meditations, that allow people to access more of their higher awareness. And so the frequencies on it, it's got binaural beats to balance the left and right brain. It's got affirmations, but it's also got my language, if you like. I'm creating scenarios that allow people to access more of themselves. So the inner alchemy is metaphysical. It's about taking you, if you want to find the wise you, if you want to connect to your guides, or if you want to find the healer self. It's just giving you a way in to that consciousness, that aware part of your consciousness that allows you to expand. So that's what the inner alchemy, the Take 10 are shorter versions of that. And I've done some other ones, like the armchair journeys are just helping you to access your consciousness through a visualization or a sensing feeling. And all the frequencies are on there. That was why I did them. Simple tools that are enjoyable, that help people to access more of that higher awareness.
That's really cool. And it's you talking on the CDs, I'm assuming, right?
They're all done by me. And I think I got a bit of help, if you know what I mean, with all of those.
Yeah, sure. I absolutely do. And the website that I'm referring to, the one I'm looking at, is alienlady.com, but you've also got the ACERN website, .au? I got to make sure I get the links right.
Yeah, that's right. ACERN.com.au is the other one. They all link, so you can find me. And also there's lots of presentations that I've got on YouTube as well, if you want to get a sense of what we've been talking about today.
Now, Awakening, if someone wanted to start reading your material, would Awakening be the first one you would recommend them get, or your new book?
It depends on if they want to find out whether this is relevant to them, then Awakening's the resource book for that. It actually takes you through the process of whether or not it's real for you or not. The second one follows up from that. It's got the children, it's got the teenagers, and it's got the adults, and it just takes a lot more stories in that one. So both of them will help you. It just depends on what appeals to you to start with. But certainly if you're questioning your own experience, then Awakening is the first one. And that was why I wrote it. What do I do about the fear? How do I know this is real? If I'm having this go on, what do I do about that? How do I get support? All those things, including how it changes you and the children. But that's sort of one package. The other package is about the big, again, are you one of the new humans? And so they all actually intertwine. So it's what feels right for you.
All right. And finally, what's next, or what is your big vision for the Australian Close Encounter Research Network, or ACERN? What's your vision for that organization?
I feel there's going to be a big shift. A lot of people have talked about the fact that something is going to change on this planet. And I think then all of this is going to change. But for the moment, it's still, there to help people try and work out what's going on in their lives and joining the dots. I would love to have an awakening center one day where the children can be supported in the way that I think they need to be supported, and also adults that are coming to this conclusion, that are waking up to their higher awareness and their experiences and being supported through it. I think this, to me, would be the ultimate, is having a place to provide the support that people need from one paradigm moving to the next paradigm, which is, where I think we're all headed.
Yeah. So if you feel like you've had an encounter or something like this has happened to you, or like you said earlier, some people might think they're crazy or whatever, this would be a good place to go check out, right? A good place that's welcoming, that could help you understand some of this.
Absolutely. And there's a questionnaire there if you're not sure. And that questionnaire is quite different to your average questionnaire. It's taking in things that aren't normally put in a questionnaire, but it will help you understand more of whether or not this is relevant to you.
Well, thank you so much, Mary, for coming on the program. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm going to be keeping tabs on you and get the books and look into this and read more about it, because I'm fascinated by all this, and I really appreciate you spending time with us here, late night here at Lighting the Void, but all the way from Australia in the afternoon. It's been a pleasure.
Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for all that you're doing, because without you, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing either. So thanks and blessings to you, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for saying that. We'll be get back, guys, with some final thoughts. That was Mary Rodwell. All the show notes will be there as well for the link. Be right back.
You love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of The Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
Okay, here we go. AncientLifeOil.com. AncientLifeOil.com. Now this is for CBD. AncientLifeOil.com. Again, for CBD. Where do I get CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. It's pretty good stuff. Organic, non-GMO. We are the Ferrari of CBDs. AncientLifeOil.com. You know, they say when you mention a person's name 3 times when you first meet, that you're going to remember. So I'd say to you, nice to meet you, AncientLifeOil.com. It's AncientLifeOil.com, right? Nice to know that you help people. AncientLifeOil.com. Think about this. Occasional stress, occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation, occasional stiffness, and intruders that get you down. AncientLifeOil.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fact for the day. So Ancient Life Oil does not help you with business deals. Hold on a second. If you feel better, it could help you make a better decision. Okay, I'm wrong. Just remember to go to AncientLifeOil.com.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves stripped bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand 3 truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137. Now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247. Now only $147 shipped in 1 business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
Greetings, galactic community. This is Suzanne Ross, host of Sci-Spy Radio, every Wednesday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific. Join me for this brand new show featuring a revolutionary new genre, Sci-Spy, merging science and spirituality to give us answers to the greatest mysteries of creation. Together, scientific discovery and spiritual revelation reveal the truth about who we are, where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going. Tune in to Sci-Spy Radio every Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific and discover the truth for yourself at thefringe.fm.
Listen, I want to tell you about G.I. Joy from GetTheTea.com. It's the best alchemical concoction of goodies for your stomach and digestive system I can recommend, and that's all based on my experience. Packed with colostrum, acidophilus, aloe, peppermint, and turmeric. If you do your own research, then you know this is the bee's knees for the stomach and digestion. Now, due to Big Brother's ears and the eye in the sky, you know I can't go into the details about what it helped me with. All I can say is I got relief. It's non-GMO, no fillers, no preservatives, manufactured right here in the US of A, and delivered to you by the only people who stay on top of the game and are out in front. Go grab a bottle of G.I. Joy at GetTheTea.com and see what all the fuss is about. Again, that's GetTheTea.com.
To call Joe, pick up the phone, dial 1-800-588-0335, toll free from the United States or Canada. You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Well, I made a boo-boo again. So tomorrow night, it's not Grimerica. Michael P. Masters is going to be with us tomorrow night, and Grimerica is going to be on Wednesday night. So just to clear that up, Patrick, as soon as he heard that, he messaged me. He's doing such a good job. I just want to say real quick that he's doing a great job. You know, I was doing all of the stuff on my own and trying to book all these guests, and now we're a month ahead in booking, if not more, and it's all thanks to Patrick, and Don's also been kind of working with him a little bit to help out. Don's got some fantastic ideas too, and I want to thank Mary Rodwell for coming on the show. I've been wanting to talk to her for over a year now, and I know she's also part of one of our hosts, Suzanne Ross's TV network you need to check out too, called sci-spy.tv. It's got all of these folks on there doing their own channels, and it's only $5 a month. That's it. It's very affordable, and you get a bunch of quality information there. You know, I can't pretend to know the answers to any of this stuff. I really don't know, but the reason why I don't jump to calling people frauds when they start talking about these types of things is because I've had my own experience, and I also know that what kind of damage that it does to people when you have had an experience, or when you know you're telling the truth and someone calls you a liar. And ever since I've felt that, ever since I've had that type of experience or felt that feeling out in the public, by the way, I mean, of course, growing up, you've had all kinds of people say they don't believe you, your best friends, etc. Well, I don't believe you, whatever, big deal. But when you're out in the public and someone says they don't believe you or they call you a fraud, to me, I don't jump on those types of things, even sometimes when I get an inclination that somebody's not telling the truth, because if they are, then what you're doing is actually not just damaging their reputation, but you're also damaging them emotionally too. And so, yeah, that's really all I got to say about that. But I don't think for 1 minute that all of the stuff Mary is talking about is fraudulent. I think all of the people that she's talked to have been telling her real stories. And you and I both know that especially little children, when they tell you these types of things, that they mean it. A teenager could make something up. An adult obviously can make something up. Children have wild imaginations. But after so many children tell you certain things, you start pulling the parallels out, then you know it to be true. And I brought up Michael Newton's book. And if you're listening to the show and you've never read Journey of Souls by Michael Newton, you need to. You can get the audio version, and that's how I read it. But he was a hypnotist who would take people into that state, I guess, or altered state of consciousness and dive in between lives. And at first you're thinking, well, this stuff can't be real. But so after hundreds and hundreds of people start seeing the same stuff or reporting the same types of things, then there's something to it. That's just basic investigation. But I think we need to do a little bit better with our communication. That's what I think. And Mary's so good at it. And I realize why a lot of people wanted me to talk to her now, because she's really good at purveying this information. Because when we turn on the TV, things like Gaia or UFO TV or YouTube, we hear phrases like that, star seeds and ascension, alien races, and just wild phrases that trigger the mind to think science fiction, or that's not reality. If we could learn to communicate these experiences a little bit better, I think we would be doing justice to our community. And what do I mean by that? Well, the reason why a lot of people are in conflict and fighting so much on Twitter and Facebook and all this other stuff is because I think we all just don't know how to communicate with each other clearly. It's kind of like if I came to you and started speaking calculus and saying that was basic math, you would think I was crazy, stupid, or a snob or something. It just wouldn't relate to you. But if I could tell my story in layman's terms without using the big phrases, like ascension and all these other things, then you would probably understand it, or you could relate to it better. And I think we're getting to that point where we're starting to understand these things. Now, I haven't talked to anybody on the show yet about implants. There's 2 guests that I want to talk to on this show, and I don't care who they are, but I want to talk to somebody about implants. Of course, I've talked to Whitley Strieber, but I also want to talk to somebody about crop circles. We have not done one show on crop circles yet, and so I can tell you for sure that we're working on that, and that in the Fringe FM chat room, there's a chat room called Guest Suggestions. And I can assure you that both Patrick and I are looking at that and trying to get every guest we can on here. But Mary said something that really hit home with me about halfway through the broadcast, that we realize that we're created, that we come from somewhere. Now, there's no way to validate this. There's no way to scientifically validate it, This is one of those types of things that I think most of us feel, even if you're an atheist, because most atheists I know weren't atheists always, and they've convinced themselves of atheism, or I guess you could say nihilism. There's all kinds of different versions of it that don't believe in nothing or believe that we were created or think this all just happened by happenstance. But deep down, I believe that all of us know that we were created, that we came from somewhere else. And most of you, when I talk to you, either through email or in the Fringe FM chat, Messenger, however I've talked to you, all of you relay that message to me. You all have different stories. You all have different experiences, but you all purvey that message to me. And I think that we could probably say that that's a truth, or that's a fundamental truth, right? And I know the stream just is dropping out a little bit. And speaking of that, usually what I do is I run 2 encoders. I run one to Spreaker, and I run one to the station. So I wanted to give you guys this update. Whether you realize it or not, the majority of the listeners of this audience listen on the Fringe FM. And I get so sick of the stream dropping out because I'm having to split the encoders that it makes me upset, you know. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking for a cloud encoder, but eventually if I can't find one, then I'm just going to run the show on the radio station. So that's coming. I just want you all to know it. The podcast will still be there on Spreaker, and I'm not real sure about this, but I just want to run one stream to the station, not two or whatever, because it's starting to get on my nerves. So yeah, we realized we were created and that we were from somewhere else. And I think that we start realizing that when we're young, when things don't add up or when we can't relate to people and we got a lot of questions. Like she brought up earlier about kids that have ADD, that we're told that they got diseases. I was told that when I was a kid, that I had a disorder. A psychologist told me that I had ADHD and that I needed to take a little bit of Ritalin. And so from the time I was in kindergarten up to the third grade, all I did was get in trouble. And I'm not talking about name on the board. Mine was always name on the board, underline, check mark. You know how they do it. They put your name on the board, then they'd check mark it, then they'd underline it, and then they'd circle it, and then you go to the principal's office, and the next thing you know, you're getting a paddling or you're getting a notes at home. I had that every stinking week, like something happened to me all the time. And that perpetuates for children that get bored, because after that, they start feeling like that there's something wrong with them. And it's funny because people that think they know about parenting, or they've never read one damn book on parenting, they all just think they know how to raise kids right off the bat, right? But they'll say, well, the kid just wants attention. That's why he's acting out and doing those types of things. But if you were one of those kids, you know damn well you're sick of the attention, especially that kind of attention. You just want to be left alone and you want to be able to do what you want to do. Well, if it, you know, my father was a real traditional guy, but he ended up dating a woman named Barbara, who I think saved my life. And I've been looking for her since I've been looking for her for a long time. That's kind of another story I'll tell you about, that who came along, and she had 2 children, and their name was Matt and Jillian, and they were really good kids. But I was a little shit. I was a terror. I was mean to them, all kinds of stuff. But she came along and helped me understand why I was different. And I remember one day at school, this lady walked up to me and pulled me out of class. Never seen the lady before. And when you're from where I am, you know the whole staff, you know everybody. So I thought something was wrong, like big time wrong, because I have no idea who this lady is. And so she pulls me into this classroom and starts asking me questions. And I'm like, what's this about? What are we doing? She said, well, everything's okay. I just need you to answer these questions for me. So her first questions would be, I'm going to give you a series of numbers and I want you to say them backwards. And she would give me obviously I don't remember the numbers now, but she would give me a ton of numbers. And she would say, okay, now say the numbers backwards. And then she would give me a puzzle to put together. It's just one test after the other. And I'm like, wow, why am I doing this? And then she would tell me a long story and tell me to repeat the story back to her, all these things. Just weird. Well, I went home I think the next day, and usually my dad, he would whistle. I'd be upstairs and he'd do this he'd do that. And if he ever did that, I knew my ass was grass, like I'd done something wrong. And he calls me downstairs and he's got this look on his face, like, you know, I done something. And he said, well, I'm proud of you. What? This is different, right? You're proud of me. He said, well, apparently there's something that I've been wanting to tell you, that you're the reason why you get in so much trouble and the reason why this and that is because you're bored and you learn faster than most kids and yada, yada. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Don't believe that for a second. I thought he was pulling my leg, but that was the truth of it. One of the teachers or counselors or somebody, I still don't know to this day, who had that lady come in and give me that test. But the next year they put me in the what's called GATE class, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with it. Probably a lot of you listening ended up in that class. Supposedly gifted and talented children, and yet you had to stay with those kids all the time. But no one ever apologized for the damage that it done to me. No one ever said, I'm sorry, this or that. And they don't apologize to kids for that stuff. But to me, it was like, okay, I learned how to do this, so why in the hell do I got to keep repeating it? That doesn't make sense to me. Once I've learned it, let's move on. I've got more questions. And, the funny thing is I started to make better grades. I started to, they would put us in group works. They let us be more creative. But what really pissed me off about that, and what I really didn't understand, is what about all the other kids that were in all the other classes just because someone didn't give them a test? I mean, how many of those kids that got in trouble, how many of those kids should have been getting the same treatment? They made this little special class for children called GATE class, so those and other kids, they would say, oh, it's GATE class. They'd make fun of you. But why did they just have one class like that? How come all of the kids didn't get that test? It was an extremely messed up deal. And I wonder sometimes how many kids did they miss, But in junior high and high school, I was a couple of years ahead in math and science and other things. But long story short was I never thought that for a second that I was put here to do a certain thing or that I came from another place. I always just felt like I couldn't relate to people my whole life. And it's kind of sad that we learn these types of things when we're older, when we're in our 30s, 40s, even later, that we learn why we're that way. Well, number one, I mean, if you believe in astrology, nobody relates to anybody. So you're going to have a hard time with that to begin with. But we're all different and we all come from somewhere. If they would just teach that stuff in class, or just at least admit to the children, look, we're obviously more intelligent than the rest of the beings on the planet. We believe that we came from somewhere and that we were created, and that's currently under investigation. I think that would make a lot more sense to most of the children. I really do. But I used to have visions of stuff when I was a kid. And I don't know if I want to really talk about it, but I did talk to Mary about it during the break. But those visions I had were so freaking scary, man. They've burned into my brain. And some of the things that I saw, I had no pre-programming to see these types of things. I was very little, and I don't, and I know what you're thinking, like, oh, here we go. Joe's going to say he's a freaking hybrid from another planet. That's not what I'm saying, but I don't know. I really don't. Other people sit in front of the sun and meditate, right? They'll go outside and they'll do what they call sun gazing and meditate. I do that stuff at night. I can't help but do that to the stars. Matter of fact, one of the meditations that I like to do is in starlight. That's pretty weird compared to the rest of the world. I think it is. But back to my first point when we started the afterthoughts is when we look into this stuff and we go, oh, well, this means that I'm from another star system or whatever. And then we go out into the alternative paranormal communities and we say, hey, I'm a reincarnated white, or I'm a great being or whatever. And my name is Click Cluck from Galaxy whatever. And I'm here to help the planet ascend. And I also know Hermes. And I'm also related to the god of thunder and this and that. And then you wonder why people treat you like you're batshit crazy. You wonder why. You wonder why. Because you can't start with that and expect everybody to listen to what you have to say and take you seriously. Not because you're not telling the truth, and not because those people are dumb and ignorant. It's a relative thing, you see? They have their own programming, and you just learned this one thing about yourself. And I think we forget that we have to be able to communicate to the rest of the world. Like, I don't even know why I think the reason why I'm talking about this is because I get a lot of complaints from people that they get mad because they don't relate to the rest of the world, or they're pissed off because so-and-so called them a fraud. Or I got another friend that's calling everybody a fraud and doesn't understand why I'm not doing it. And it's because we're not communicating our experiences effectively with each other. It's like we're speaking two different languages. If you can imagine, I mean, for some of you Trekkie fans out there, if you can imagine somebody like Spock coming down trying to speak to a regular human about his planet, that's what it's like. That's what the Prime Directive is all about, because it messes everything up. That's why people think you're wacky, you know. And they say, well, they just fear change. They're scared of, you know, they're afraid of change. They're not afraid of you. They're upset because you exist. They're upset because you don't fit in with their paradigm. They're not scared of you at all. But if you just learn how to communicate, I think that would help. And what's happening too is that there's evangelists that take advantage of this stuff. And this is something that I was talking off the air about with Mary. She brought that up too, that, you know, that she's not an evangelist. She's here just to help people, right? That's it. But then you've got evangelists they take the preacher route, you know, they want stadiums full of people, and they know there's thousands and thousands of people that they can relate this language to, and they're going to help the world ascend, but they're not really reaching out to the rest of the world. If you look at how they're targeting people, they're only targeting you, this community. That's what they're targeting. If they really wanted to help the rest of the world, then they would reach out to the person that has had a weird experience, but is too afraid to talk about it. Like when your friends call you at night drunk, you know, and they finally want to tell you about their paranormal experience because they're opening up. It's because they're afraid to tell you. But there's not a whole lot of money in that, is there? You see, I think we just need to learn how to communicate better. And the most of you that I've talked to are really good at it. You're really good at it. In fact, I'll go as far as to say this. Some of you that are upset about these other people that get on stage and make a ton of money communicate so much better than those people. Then why aren't you doing what they're doing? I'm not saying going out and being an evangelist, but you should be going out and making your presence known more and communicating more. Do what you're here to do. There's only so much we can do. Sit around and complaining about it, it's not going to help, I don't think. I really don't think it will. And I think we created this with something else I'll have to get into on another night. I'll probably have a guest host on when I do it, but you always heard that as above, so below thing, and I'm starting to think that we kind of create things on a smaller level that are universal truths sometimes. Now, if I was to communicate that to you in a weird way to make you think I was wacky, I would say that I created fractal forms of galactic truths that are passed down from some type of high federation. And when I represent them here on Earth, only the alien people see them. Or I could say that we created the internet because we're evolving, and that it's possible that the universe does transfer data through light and through stars. I mean, it's possible. Everything happens through light in the universe, it seems, light and sound. And so we figured out how to do it on a smaller level through technology, the microcosm, and we created machines that could connect to each other so I could talk to somebody that's not here now. I could actually talk to thousands of people that are not even in my presence. And we forget how fantastic that is sometimes, I think. But you all understand that, don't you? See, there's nothing spectacular or alien about that. But that could have been passed down. That could be part of just our evolution of awakening. We created this machine so you and I across the planet can connect. And I think sooner or later, we're going to start figuring out how to grow that and how to make that machine get bigger so that we can communicate across planets and stars and galaxies. That's my dream anyways. Well, I got to get out of here. I want to thank Pacho, my producer, Don, Dennis, Eric, program director, also Jeremy Scott. Also, this show was produced by the Fringe FM. Don't copy it without written permission. And music was by Chronox. Guitar was by Bundy. Got to get out of here. We'll see you guys tomorrow night.
Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised.